Chapter 89. Go to Watch Network. Li Yundong's words made the surrounding guests look sideways, and the waiter even said with a sad face, "But this is a Western restaurant." At this time, Xueqi was very playful and wanted to cooperate with Li Yundong. She said bluntly, "Go and get 3 pairs of chopsticks. I know you have them here." The waiter went away with a bitter face. After a while, he really brought 3 pairs of chopsticks. Super_speed. New. Li Yundong ignored the various gazes around him. He picked up a pair of chopsticks and laughed. Eating French food with chopsticks, this is the combination of Chinese and Western. Xueqi had always been cautious and polite, and she paid more attention to her image in public. She had never met such a shameless guy like Li Yundong. Li Yundong had been with Xueqi for a long time, and he had become more and more unscrupulous. He didn't care about the eyes of the people around him at all. He had even demolished a building. Now he was eating with chopsticks in a Western restaurant. Xueqi only felt that it was fun and exciting. She picked up a piece of foie gras with chopsticks and sent it to Li Yundong's plate. "Try it. This is a famous French dish." Li Yundong picked up the foie gras with a smile and took a bite. Then he brought it to Xueqi's mouth. "Try it." Xueqi took a bite and said while eating, "It's not bad, but it's not as good as Yundong's." Xueqi looked at Li Yundong in surprise. "You can cook." The waiter who was serving the dishes also glanced at Li Yundong. Although his face was calm, he secretly despised them in his heart. These guys who don't know how to be polite also know how to cook. Li Yundong said with a smile, "I can't cook French food, but I can cook a little Chinese food." Xueqi smiled admiringly and said, "I can cook a lot of things, but I don't know how to cook." Li Yundong picked up a piece of fresh shellfish in front of him, put it into his mouth, and said, "It's better for girls not to go into the kitchen. First, the oil and smoke will damage your skin. Second." Li Yundong turned his head to look at Xueqi and said with a smile, "Second, it's easy to get into trouble." Xueqi and Li Yundong looked at each other in a way that only the two of them could understand. They both smiled, and Xueqi stuck her tongue out at Li Yundong. Xueqi was very smart. She knew that there must be a story between the two of them that outsiders did not understand. She was very tactful and did not ask further. She just ate slowly with chopsticks, unlike Li Yundong and Xueqi, who ate in full swing and shouted as if they were in a food stall. Watch net. 7K. Oath M. Rainbow carrot asterisk literature _ learning % super #speed. Update. The surrounding guests all looked at him with disdain and cursed him in their hearts. After a while, the waiter who delivered the food came over with an apologetic face and said to Xueqi, "I'm really sorry. Our high-grade caviar today has been reserved. There's no more left." When Xueqi heard this, she stopped talking with Li Yundong. Instead of using French, she said in Chinese, "Call your manager here." The waiter looked embarrassed and called the manager. The manager was a Chinese man. He bowed respectfully to Xueqi and said in Chinese, "What can I do for you?" Xueqi said, "I want to order high-grade caviar. Your waiter said that it has been reserved?" The manager smiled and said, "Yes, I'm really sorry. This kind of caviar is too rare. It will take a month to get a little, so the order has already been reserved. Why don't you order some other dishes?" Xueqi frowned slightly, took out a pure gold card from her LV bag, and handed it over. "Cancel the order and make it for me." The manager glanced at the gold card and looked embarrassed. He knew that there were only a few people in Tiannan City who could have such a gold card. Only the rich and powerful could have it. Not to mention himself, even the owner of this shop could not afford to offend him. He hesitated for a moment and said, "Okay, I'll arrange it." Xueqi didn't wait for him to leave and said, "Also, help me order a skirt from the mall next door. Your waiter here made my skirt wet." The manager apologized again and again. After asking about the size of the skirt Xueqi wanted, he turned his head and glared at the waiter who had caused trouble, then carefully left. Li Yundong smiled and said, "It's good to be rich. There are people to help you with everything." Xueqi said in a lonely and bleak tone, "Rich people have their own troubles, and poor people have their own problems. No one is envious of each other. I'm very envious of you too. I hope you can continue like this." Xueqi took Li Yundong's arm and said with a smile, "Of course. I'm sure it will continue like this." Li Yundong pinched the little girl's cheek affectionately. Hey, let go of me. Su Chan looked at him with a hurt expression. You dislike me? Li Yundong smiled and said, Idiot, I'm going to the bathroom. Are you coming with me? Su Chan made a face. Hurry up, it stinks. Li Yundong shook his head and smiled. He said to Zhou Qin, Sorry, I have to leave for a while. Go to the internet. 7K. Oath M. Rainbow carrot asterisk literature learning % super hashtag speed. Update. Zhou Qin watched Li Yundong leave. She looked at the girl in front of her, who was extremely spoiled by Li Yundong, and couldn't help but sigh in her heart. No matter from which aspect, this girl is a stunner and a pet that men dream of. What's more, she is lively, cheerful, cute, and well-behaved. It would be strange if she is not loved by men. Zhou Qin sighed sincerely and said, Your boyfriend is so good to you. Su Chan was not shrewd at all. As soon as she heard Zhou Qin's words, she raised her chin proudly and said, Of course. As she spoke, she told him about how Li Yundong had cooked for her, what trouble she had caused, and how Li Yundong had tolerated them all and never blamed her for anything. The more Zhou Qin listened, the more envious she became, especially when she heard that Li Yundong had overdrawn tens of thousands of yuan just to make Su Chan dress up beautifully. She was even more surprised. A boy was not rich. He only had 10,000 yuan in his hand, but he gave all his money to a girl. A rich man had tens of billions of yuan in assets, but he gave a girl 100,000 yuan. Between the two, it seemed that the latter had paid more, but in fact, the former had given everything he had, while the latter was just a drop in the bucket. Buddhists believe that the wealth of a country was far less than that of a poor person who had destroyed his home to worship Buddha, even if this poor family only had a rotten steamed bun. Most of the men Zhou Qin had met since she was a child had been respectful and polite to her, flattering her, or pretending to be profound. But no matter what, they all wanted something from her, but no one had ever given everything for her without asking for anything in return. When will there be someone who will treat me like this? Zhou Qin was lost in thought for a moment. After a while, Li Yundong came back from the bathroom. He saw the two girls sitting opposite each other in a daze. He thought that the two girls had quarreled, so he couldn't help asking, What's wrong with you? Zhou Qin glanced at Li Yundong and sighed with a complicated look in her eyes. Nothing. I suddenly realized that in this world, often what you miss is the most worthy of cherishing. Li Yundong was confused by her words. He looked at Su Chan and said, Hey, what did you say that you shouldn't have said again? Su Chan said angrily, You're so annoying. Am I the kind of person who talks casually? Li Yundong nodded very seriously. You are, I'm very sure. Su Chan pouted. You're so annoying. Zhou Qin smiled and helped Su Chan out. Actually, what Su Chan told me just now was something about the past. You are really good to her. Li Yundong smiled and pinched Su Chan's pouting mouth. Su Chan dodged with a smile. As he played with the little girl, he said with a smile, When I was at my weakest, she was the only one who looked up to me and was willing to stay by my side. If I didn't love her, who else would I love? Su Chan said angrily. Then why are you being so mean to me? Li Yundong pretended to be angry and said, How dare you talk back? Zhou Qin watched the two of them play as if there was no one else around. Suddenly, she felt that the smile on her face was so stiff that she couldn't control it. Her heart was rolling with discomfort, and she couldn't stay here for a second longer. Fortunately, the skirt she had ordered was delivered at this time. Zhou Qin found an excuse to stand up, forced a smile, and said, I'm going to change. Li Yundong saw that Zhou Qin's skirt was indeed wet at this time, as if she had peed in her pants. It was very unsightly. He nodded and said, Okay, but you have to be fast. Otherwise, I won't care if you finish eating here. As he said this, Li Yundong pointed at Su Chan and winked. This girl has a big belly. You've seen it. Su Chan pounced on Li Yundong's back, scratching and biting. You're talking bad about me again. Li Yundong laughed, and Zhou Qin also smiled and walked away quickly. There were 13 dishes on the traditional French menu. When Zhou Qin left, the waiter pushed another dining cart over. On it was a plate of Marseille fish soup, which was the second traditional dish. Not long after, the waiter pushed the cart over like flowing water, one dish after another. After a while, Li Yundong's table was filled with all kinds of French dishes. Li Yundong and Su Chan were dazzled. Su Chan swallowed and said to Li Yundong carefully, "This meal cost a lot, right?" Li Yundong nodded in agreement. Acting like a commoner, he pretended to be knowledgeable and said, "It would cost at least a few thousand." The waiter who was serving the dishes rolled his eyes and thought to himself, "The foie gras in front of you costs thousands. A set of dishes costs more than 20,000 yuan. Not to mention the top-grade caviar, which is called black gold. It can be seen without tens of thousands or even hundreds of thousands of yuan. These two guys look decent, but why are they so bumpkins?" Although Su Chan and Li Yundong could be regarded as the leader of the younger generation of cultivators at this time, and the other could be regarded as a rising star who had just started cultivating, no matter how powerful a cultivator was, they could not be separated from the secular world, and they could not be separated from money. Dharma, money, companions, and earth treasures. Money was not a joke. Chen Jining, a modern Taoist master in China, once said, "If you have not heard the Tao, it is difficult to find the Dharma. If you have heard the Tao, it is difficult to find the wealth." Even Buddhism, which had the most incense offerings, had to rely on incense to survive, let alone Li Yundong and Su Chan, who were struggling in the secular world. A penny could make a hero, both ancient and modern times. The two of them looked at the table of exquisite French dishes, and Su Chan suddenly asked, "Hey, Yundong, what if Xueqi suddenly runs away?" Li Yundong suddenly felt awkward, and couldn't help but sweat on his back. He stammered, "No way." Su Chan said worriedly, "What if she really runs away and we can't afford to pay her?" Li Yundong smacked Su Chan on the forehead. "Idiot, don't talk nonsense. If that's really the case, I'll pawn you here." Su Chan looked at Li Yundong bitterly. "Then remember to come and pick me up." Li Yundong laughed, hugged Su Chan, and kissed her hard. He whispered in her ear, "Idiot, how could I be willing to pawn you here? We'll finish eating later, and then when they're not paying attention, we'll sneak away." Su Chan smiled. "Good then. Hurry up and eat. Eat up and drink up." Li Yundong added, "If you can't finish it, take it all away." The two of them looked at each other and laughed, as if they had done something amazing, and their hearts were full of joy and pride. Just as the two of them were discussing whether they would dine and dash if Xueqi didn't come back, a voice suddenly sounded next to them. "Hey, look, who is this? What a coincidence. You guys can also come to this kind of place? Tisk eating French food with chopsticks? That's so King creative. I'm impressed." The voice sounded a little familiar to Li Yundong. He turned his head and saw a handsome boy looking at him with a mocking and contemptuous expression. The boy was none other than Lu Chuan, the second-generation rich kid that Li Yundong had teased in the classroom earlier. Lu Chuan was the one Li Yundong had teased earlier. Happy reading. Chapter 90. Please remember the domain name of this site. Or search on Baidu Sanlian Literature Network. Li Yundong saw Lu Chuan at first glance. This guy was still wearing dazzling branded clothes. He was also surrounded by a group of handsome men and beautiful women. All of them were wearing strange clothes, and they were all wearing high-end branded clothes. Li Yundong secretly frowned and muttered in his heart. This guy didn't learn his lesson last time? But there are some people in this world who never learn their lesson just because they have money and power. Last time, Lu Chuan had been so scared by Li Yundong that he lost control of his bladder in front of everyone. After the incident, he had felt humiliated and had been trying to get back his dignity. But before he could do anything, there had been a school shooting at school. Not only had Li Yundong not been injured, but his reputation had also risen to a level that the students on campus had to look up to. This made Lu Chuan, who had always been the center of attention, jealous and resentful. Jealousy and anger often clouded a person's mind, making them forget a lot of things. Lu Chuan was the same. He had brought a group of friends to this French restaurant, and unexpectedly, he saw Li Yundong there as well. He was reminded of the humiliation he had suffered last time, and couldn't help but provoke him. Li Yundong glanced at Lu Chuan and ignored him. He didn't want to argue with this kind of brainless rich kid. But Lu Chuan took Li Yundong's attitude as a concession. He suddenly became more and more arrogant. Lu Chuan's face was full of smiles as he greeted his friends behind him. "They're my schoolmates." There were 2 men and 3 women in the group. Including Lu Chuan, it made 3 pairs. Without waiting for the waiter to guide them to their seats, They sat down next to Li Yundong, looking like they were ready to watch a good show. Lu Chuan didn't stand on ceremony and sat down across from Li Yundong. He glanced at the dishes on the table and looked up at Li Yundong in surprise. Not bad. You know how to eat. You don't use chopsticks and knives. This is a Chinese style. TSK. TSK. You know how to order. Did he order all 13 authentic French dishes? Hey, wait, there's one more dish missing. Lu Chuan turned his head and smiled at the beautifully dressed beauty he brought with him. Babe, come and take a look, see which dish we're missing. If you can guess it, I will reward you greatly. Li Yundong was no longer in the mood to eat. He crossed his arms in front of his chest and smiled at Lu Chuan, who was directing and acting like a clown. The pretty girl beside Lu Chuan was pretty, but the makeup on her face was too thick. When she saw Su Chan sitting next to Li Yundong, she was shocked and envious of Su Chan's natural beauty. Her heart ached, but she was also afraid that Lu Chuan would take a fancy to Su Chan, so she started acting coquettishly. Can't I guess? This is my first time eating French food. Why don't you teach him? Lu Chuan's vanity was greatly satisfied. He pointed at the various dishes on the table and said, French cuisine is missing. The best and most luxurious dish, caviar. Lu Chuan proudly pinched the chin of the beauty beside him and said, I invited you here today because I've been waiting in line for almost half a year to order the best caviar in this shop. When Li Yundong and Su Chan heard this, they immediately looked at each other. Su Chan said in a low voice, Yundong, so Xueqi cancelled. Li Yundong grabbed her hand and gestured for her to stop talking. Holding back his laughter, he whispered to Su Chan, don't talk. Let him do what he wants. Let's just watch him do his tricks. The pretty girl beside Lu Chuan took the opportunity to flatter him. Brother Lu, you are so awesome. I heard that caviar in this shop is very hard to order. Many people can't get it. By the way, why are there different grades of caviar here? Lu Chuan himself was a rich man who pursued luxury and vanity. How would he know where the brands he wore were made? How would he know the name of the caviar? Lu Chuan's expression suddenly became awkward. The pretty girl in his arms observed his expression and realized that she had asked a question that Lu Chuan couldn't answer. She immediately changed the topic. Pretending to be innocent, she clapped her hands and said, Brother Lu, why don't we eat this set of traditional French cuisine? Lu Chuan took the opportunity to get off the stage. On the surface, he was explaining to the pretty girl beside him, but in reality, he was showing off to Li Yundong. Do you know how much this set costs? The pretty girl said coquettishly, I don't know. Brother Lu, don't tell me you can't afford it. Lu Chuan snorted. Some people can't afford it, but there's no way I can't afford it. He pointed at the foie gras on the table and said, This dish costs several thousand yuan. The entire set costs 24,000 yuan. If you include the caviar, it's even higher. Li Yundong was shocked. Holy shit, this is daylight robbery. Last time you spent tens of thousands on clothes. This time, you're going to spend tens of thousands on a meal. How can we live like this? Anything that has to do with capitalism is really extravagant. Su Chan was even more shocked. She couldn't help but tug at Li Yundong's sleeve. It's too expensive, she whispered. We're going to have to dine and dash. This sentence happened to be heard by Lu Chuan, and he suddenly burst out laughing. Oh my, this is so funny. If you don't have the money, don't come to a place like this. Lu Chuan pointed at Li Yundong and laughed. Dine and dash? I'm dying of laughter. My stomach hurts. You guys are so creative. His words amused the group of friends at the next table, who were also laughing heartily and forced themselves to sit back. Li Yundong, on the other hand, wasn't angry. He looked at Lu Chuan calmly, a mocking smile on his face. Unfortunately, Lu Chuan was too proud to notice it. When Lu Chuan was done laughing, he wiped the tears from the corners of his eyes. He snapped his fingers and called for the waiter to come over. He pointed at Li Yundong's table and said in a charitable tone, I'll pay the bill for this table. The attendant looked at him in surprise and asked, All of them? Lu Chuan said in a rich voice. All of it. That's not much. The waiter glanced at him and left with a smile. Lu Chuan said to Li Yundong proudly, You're lucky to have met me. I'm a magnanimous man, so I won't hold it against you for what happened last time. But next time remember, You should go to a place of your own volition. Oh, and don't use chopsticks in a place like this. It's so embarrassing. Look at the way the foreigners look at you guys. Sigh, after so many years of reform and opening up, we can't embarrass ourselves like this, right? Li Yundong looked at Lu Chuan with a smile on his face, letting him jump up and down and wave his chopsticks around freely. After a while, the waiter came back with the bill. Sir, he said with a smile. The total bill is 132,500 yuan. Would you like to sign the bill? Lu Chuan was so shocked that he almost fell out of his seat. His eyes widened and he stammered, How much? Lu Chuan knew that no matter how rich he was, this money belonged to his father, not him. Therefore, no matter how generous his father was, there was no way he would let him spend more than 100,000 yuan on a meal. Besides, for Lu Chuan, if this amount of money was worth it, he would just grit his teeth and stomp his feet. But the problem was, he couldn't be a sucker for nothing. The total bill is 132,500 yuan, the waiter said with a smile. Lu Chuan snatched the bill and glanced at it. He pointed at the dishes on the table and said angrily, The dishes here cost 132,500 yuan? Do you think I'm an idiot? It's not like I haven't eaten here before. The waiter said with a smile, But there's one more dish that hasn't been served yet. What kind of dish costs 100,000 yuan? Lu Chuan said angrily. The waiter smiled. This is our top dish, the best caviar made from the beluga sturgeon known as the Caspian sea pearl. Lu Chuan looked at Li Yundong in shock. You ordered such a dish? I've been waiting in line for months. How is this possible? Did you book it before me? Li Yundong's expression was humble, but his words almost made Lu Chuan die of anger. No, I just ordered it. I didn't know it was so expensive. Lu Chuan almost vomited blood. He was so angry. Why was it so hard for him to stand out? Was this kid sent by God to mess with him? Lu Chuan was so angry that his face turned red. He stood there, unsure of how to get out of this situation. The waiter asked carefully, Sir, would you like to sign the bill? Lu Chuan was too arrogant before, so he couldn't back down. He looked around and saw that not only were his friends looking at him, but the other customers were also looking at him. For a moment, this corner of the restaurant was so quiet that it was scary. Lu Chuan was so angry that he gritted his teeth and said, Sign. Are you going to treat my words like a fart? The beauty in his arms let out a sigh of relief. She looked at Lu Chuan with admiration. Brother Lu, you're so generous. Li Yundong also clapped with a smile. Not bad, not bad. You're generous enough to spend money like that. Lu Chuan felt his cheeks burning. He didn't expect that he'd almost humiliated himself when he tried to humiliate Li Yundong today. The total cost of this meal was probably more than 300,000 yuan. More than 300,000 yuan in one meal. Even though he was a rich second-generation heir, he couldn't afford this kind of torture, could he? Lu Chuan was angry and resentful. He sat back down at his friend's table with a livid face. After a while, the caviar from Li Yundong's table was served. Everyone at the table stared at the small plate of black caviar with their eyes wide open. They thought to themselves, such a small thing costs more than 100,000 yuan? What's that smell? Lu Chuan had brought his friends here today because he wanted to show off the dish he had ordered. But when he saw that Li Yundong and Su Chan were going to taste it before he did, he snorted in anger. What are you looking at? We'll get one too. You'll know when you eat it. It's not good to eat too much of it. Li Yundong snorted. These words obviously had the meaning of sour grapes, but Lu Chuan's friends were very tactful and didn't touch Lu Chuan's tiger whiskers again. After a while, the lobby manager walked over with an apologetic look on his face. Are you Mr. Lu Chuan? Yes, Lu Chuan said impatiently. When will my caviar be served? The lobby manager said apologetically. I'm sorry, your caviar has been ordered by someone else. Otherwise, look, we still have top-notch French roasted snails and top-notch Estella sturgeon caviar. This is also a very delicious top-notch caviar. Look, Lu Chuan's eyes widened. What did you say? He stammered. Why would my caviar be ordered by someone else? I've been waiting in line for months. Who took my caviar away? The lobby manager looked back at Li Yundong and Su Chan awkwardly. Then, he signaled with his eyes, they picked us. After he said that, Li Yundong and Su Chan finally couldn't hold it in anymore. They both burst out laughing at the same time. Li Yundong scooped up a spoonful of black caviar with a spoon and brought it to Su Chan's mouth. With a serious expression, he sighed and said, "Alas, Su Chan, there are still many good people in this world. Look, the two of us can't afford it, but someone is eagerly giving us money. It's not enough to just give us money, but they're also worried that we won't be able to eat well. They're even giving us their best dishes." Sigh, what kind of spirit is this? Su Chan took a small bite of the caviar and said with a smile, "What kind of spirit?" "This is the spirit of an internationalist rich man," Li Yundong said with a straight face. "It's the spirit of a rich man." After that, the two of them burst out laughing. Quick search for the official website. Please search on Baidu Sanlian Literature Network. Chapter 91. Go to watch net. Li Yundong's words made Lu Chuan's face turn purplish red. For a moment, he was at a loss for words. Go to watch net. 7K. Oath Literature. By now, Lu Chuan's friends knew that Li Yundong and Su Chan were from a powerful family. Birds of a feather flocked together. The fact that they could hang out with Lu Chuan meant that most of them were the descendants of the rich. They knew that the person who could make the restaurant cancel their order just like that had to be someone they couldn't afford to mess with. But they knew that Lu Chuan, who was in a fit of rage, didn't know that his IQ was close to zero. Li Yundong had never been a kind person. He had been holding back for so long, just waiting for this moment to kick Lu Chuan when he was down. Li Yundong and Su Chan each took a bite of the caviar. As they chewed loudly and praised each other. Lu Chuan couldn't take it anymore. He slammed the table and yelled at the manager. "How could you do this to me? What right do you have to cancel my order? What right do they have to be in front of me? I can't accept this. I want to file a complaint." The manager's forehead was covered in sweat. Just as he was at a loss for what to do, he heard a cold voice coming from the side. "I'm the one who cancelled your order. What's wrong? Do you have a problem with that?" Lu Chuan was still in a fit of rage. He turned around and yelled, "I have a problem with that." But when he finished shouting, he found a beautiful girl with an outstanding temperament standing in front of him. This girl was holding a small LV bag in one hand and a shopping bag in the other. She was looking at him coldly. Xueqi? Lu Chuan was dumbfounded. His anger subsided. "Why are you here?" he stammered. Xueqi glared at him coldly. "I invited my friend here for dinner. What's wrong? You have a problem with that?" Lu Chuan was one of the few people at school who knew about Xueqi's background. He admired her beauty and elegance, but at the same time, he feared and coveted the power behind her. He had tried to woo Xueqi several times, but never dared to offend her. Lu Chuan smiled sheepishly. "Why would I have a problem with that? If you wanted caviar, you could have just told me. I'll give it to you." Xueqi raised her chin slightly and said arrogantly and domineeringly, "If I want something, I always take it myself. It's not someone else's turn to give it to me." Li Yundong couldn't help but cheer in his heart. Although Xueqi is a girl, her words and actions are as domineering as a man's. Amazing. Whoever married her would not be able to tame her unless they had the ability to reach the heavens. Lu Chuan's face turned red at Xueqi's words, and he was speechless for a long time. Watch net. Super_speed. More. New Xueqi glanced at him coldly and smiled apologetically at Li Yundong. "I'm so sorry to have kept you waiting." Xueqi's smile really made Lu Chuan and his friends feel as if the biting cold wind had suddenly turned into a gentle drizzle. Regardless of whether they were men or women, they were all stunned. One of the boys whispered, "That woman looked so fierce just now. I thought she didn't know how to smile." The girl next to the boy said in a low voice, "It's not that she doesn't know how to smile. She just won't smile at people she doesn't like." After that, Lu Chuan and the rest of the boys at the table fell silent. They stared at Li Yundong with jealousy and hatred. How dare this bastard take up two such exquisite beauties all by himself? Is there any justice in this world? Is there any humanity left? Isn't he afraid of being struck by lightning? Xueqi sat next to Li Yundong. She hadn't even eaten 2 mouthfuls when Lu Chuan and the rest of the boys stared at her. She felt uncomfortable all over. Can we eat somewhere else? She whispered to Li Yundong apologetically. Li Yundong had the same idea. Sure. Why don't we go back to my place? I'll show you what I can do. Xueqi had originally wanted to go to another table, but after hearing Li Yundong's words, she was stunned for a moment. Then she smiled sweetly. Really? Then I'm in for a treat. As she said that, she picked up her small bag and the clothes bag that she had taken off with her dress. Then, she stood up to call the waiter for the bill. Li Yundong held back his laughter and stopped Xueqi. Someone already paid for the bill. Xueqi was stunned. Have you paid the bill? Li Yundong pointed at Lu Chuan. He bought it. Watch net. Xueqi turned her head to look at Lu Chuan in surprise. When Lu Chuan saw Xueqi looking at him, he quickly squeezed a smile from his mournful face. His smile was uglier than crying. Xueqi's expression was indifferent. Oh, thank you. Lu Chuan really didn't know whether he should laugh or cry. The expression on his face was very interesting. Without waiting for his reply, Xueqi said to Li Yundong, "Shall we go?" Li Yundong said in surprise, "There are so many dishes. Aren't you going to pack them?" Xueqi smiled and said, "Once French food is served overnight, it will be very unpalatable. I won't take it away. Anyway, Lu Chuan is paying for it. Let's give it to them." Lu Chuan was so angry that he was jumping up and down. He cursed in his heart. You guys had such a big meal, and I'm still not done paying for it? You even threw the leftovers to us. You think we've gotten a great deal? What a joke. How could there be such a thing in this world? But Lu Chuan didn't dare say those words aloud. Li Yundong grabbed his things and turned around to look at Su Chan, who was eating with all her might. Her mouth was stuffed to the brim, and her cheeks were bulging up like a hamster's. Li Yundong was so angry that he almost laughed. He smacked Su Chan on the forehead. Aren't you afraid that your cheeks will break? Let's go. This is so embarrassing. It's going to be a waste if we don't finish it, Su Chan said in a muffled voice. Li Yundong pressed his forehead, looking like he couldn't stand it anymore. He pulled Su Chan out of the door. Su Chan kept looking back at the food on the table. She pointed to the caviar on the table and shouted, "We haven't finished the caviar yet." But her mouth was full of food, so how could anyone hear what she was shouting? Lu Chuan and the others watched Li Yundong, Su Chan, and Xueqi walk out of the door. For a moment, they looked at the withered food on the table next door, speechless. The lobby manager wiped the sweat off his forehead awkwardly. "Sir," he said carefully, "only a spoonful of the caviar has been touched. It's not dirty. What do you think?" Lu Chuan's eyes almost popped out of their sockets. "You mean you want me to eat the leftovers?" The lobby manager sweated profusely and stuttered, No, I mean..." Before he could finish, one of his companions whispered to Lu Chuan, "Brother Lu, this thing costs over $100,000. Are you going to throw it away? I saw that they only touched a spoonful. It's not dirty, is it? You can't just eat it with money. Don't you want to wait for a few more months? You should at least let us try something new. Let's see what this thing that costs over $100,000 tastes like." Lu Chuan's heart skipped a beat. "Yeah, I spent over $100,000. I can't just not taste it. It's over $100,000, not $12. But he couldn't bring himself to put on a straight face. "If you want to eat it, you guys eat it." "I'm not eating it," he said. "Brother Lu, you eat it." Everyone could see the hypocrisy in his words. Lu Chuan acted like he had no other choice. He waved his hand impatiently at the lobby manager. "Forget it," he said. "Bring the caviar over." "Hey, don't do this next time." The lobby manager was relieved. He wanted to take the caviar back and process it, but who would have thought that Lu Chuan would eat it without any hesitation? He hurriedly signaled to the waiter beside him. The waiter quickly picked up the caviar on the table and was about to bring it to Lu Chuan's table. But just as he was about to pick it up, he heard a person barge in through the door. Su Chan rushed up to him like a gust of wind. Without saying a word, she snatched the caviar from the waiter's hand. Without saying a word, she grabbed the caviar with her bare hands and gobbled it up. It only took her a few bites to finish the small plate of caviar. When she was done, Su Chan licked her fingers and wiped her mouth. Then, she smiled apologetically at the stunned Lu Chuan and the others. Sorry, she said. I forgot to eat. After that, he turned his head, threw down the plate, and rushed out like a gust of wind. As he shouted, he made a fuss. Aya, wait for me! For a moment, the French restaurant was so quiet that even the sound of a pin dropping could be heard. Lu Chuan and his companions sat there like wax figures, staring blankly at the caviar dish on the table that had been emptied and was spinning non-stop. Li Yundong and Su Chan got into a taxi. Li Yundong and Su Chan sat in the back, while Zhou Qin sat in the front. As soon as they got into the car, Li Yundong lectured Su Chan, "You really are the reincarnation of a starving ghost. You're so embarrassing. Why did you run back to the restaurant to eat?" Su Chan sat in the back with her head lowered. She looked at Li Yundong pitifully and said, Okay, I won't do it again. Hey, did you enjoy eating so much on your own? Li Yundong scolded with a smile. That's black gold. Su Chan smacked her lips. I ate it too fast. I didn't get to taste it, she said regretfully. Li Yundong was so angry that he laughed. You really are a pig eating ginseng fruit. You're the pig, Su Chan said. You're the monkey son. You're Monk Sha. Zhou Qin, who was sitting in the front seat, couldn't stop smiling when she saw the two of them joking around in the rearview mirror. Now that she knew how Lu Chuan had come looking for trouble and ended up humiliating himself, she couldn't help but burst into laughter every time she thought about the look on Lu Chuan's face. After a 20-minute drive, the group arrived at their place. Li Yundong brought the two beauties, one big and one small, to a nearby supermarket to buy some groceries. Then they headed back home. When they entered the neighborhood, a girl happened to walk across the road from the opposite side of the road. She was young, about 16 or 17 years old. She was wearing a high school uniform, and her face could be described as beautiful. This girl was none other than Hong Ling, a living cultivator who also lived in Hongxing New District like Li Yundong. Hong Ling saw Li Yundong and was immediately stunned. He's back? She thought. But when her eyes fell on the backs of the two beautiful women beside Li Yundong, she frowned. Beauty is the enemy of cultivators. This guy is so lustful. How did he improve his cultivation so much? Hong Ling couldn't help but feel puzzled. She thought for a moment and secretly made up her mind. It seems that I should pay him a visit later. Happy reading. OM/. Chapter 92. Go to watch net. Li Yundong led Zhou Qin and Su Chan into the house. He smiled at Zhou Qin, who was looking around curiously, and said, It's definitely not as luxurious as yours. Don't laugh at me. Go to watch net. 7K. OM. Zhou Qin pursed her lips and smiled. Do you think that the people who live in the compound live a luxurious life? In fact, in terms of decoration and conditions, the compound is not as good as yours. It's just that there are armed police on duty and strict access, so it's safer. Your place is very surprising. It's so big and spacious, and the decoration is very tasteful. Did you buy it or rent it? Li Yundong said as he carried large and small bags of vegetables into the kitchen. I rented it. How can I afford to buy a house? Zhou Qin looked around the decoration of the room and said with a smile, You really live up to your name of hiding a mistress in a gold house. Li Yundong was a little proud and said with a smile, It's not a gold house, but it's a real gold house hiding a pig. When Su Chan heard this, she immediately said angrily, You're scolding me again. You're the pig. Li Yundong laughed and scolded. You ate so much just now. If you're not a pig, what are you? You won't be able to eat later. Su Chan stomped her feet and said to Zhou Qin, Look, he only knows how to bully me. Although Zhou Qin was very envious of Su Chan's natural cuteness and innocence made it impossible for her to really feel jealous. She said with a smile, This is an internal conflict of the people. Other countries can't interfere. Seeing that Zhou Qin was sitting on the top of the mountain and watching the tigers fight, Su Chan pouted and sat alone on the sofa. She turned on the TV and changed the channel randomly. Every time she pressed the TV, she seemed to be venting her anger. Li Yundong chuckled at Su Chan's childish behavior. He put on his apron and said to Zhou Qin, Wait a minute. I cook very quickly. Why don't you use my computer to play online for a while? Zhou Qin smiled and said, Go do your thing. Don't worry about me. I'm going to look around. Li Yundong smiled and said, "Feel free to look around. Then I'll go in." Then he closed the kitchen door and went into the kitchen to get busy. Xueqi wandered around Li Yundong's house and found that Li Yundong and Su Chan were sleeping in separate rooms. She couldn't find Su Chan's things in Li Yundong's room, nor could she find any trace of Li Yundong in Su Chan's room. Watch net. These two people have been living together. Haven't they had sex yet? Xueqi couldn't help but feel a little surprised. She sat down on Li Yundong's bed and gently stroked the bed with her hand, as if she was feeling Li Yundong's strong manly scent. She looked a little dazed. Xueqi turned her head and looked outside the door. She saw Su Chan curled up on the sofa watching TV, while Li Yundong was busy in the kitchen. She gathered her courage, picked up the pillow on Li Yundong's bed, and gently sniffed it. Li Yundong's body was filled with powerful and majestic yuan-yang qi. Although Xueqi's physique was not as strong as Little Fox's, it was still a rare pure yin body. She was most sensitive to Li Yundong's huge yuan-yang qi and was easily attracted to it. So, just a sniff of Li Yundong's scent on the pillow made her feel flustered. Xueqi hurriedly put down the pillow in her hand. She felt her cheeks and body heat up, as if she had done something shameful. Although no one saw her, Xueqi still stood up with a guilty conscience. She pretended to be calm and looked around, then casually flipped through the books piled in front of Li Yundong's bed. Most of the books were. Xueqi flipped through them and found a CD in the middle. There were words on the CD, "The Days I Lived with a Flight Attendant." Xueqi pursed her lips and smiled, thinking, "This guy thinks this is quite appropriate." She looked at Li Yundong's room for a while and felt more and more bored, so she quietly opened a gap in the kitchen door and watched Li Yundong busy himself with an apron. Li Yundong's knife skills were very good. When he cut the vegetables, he was fast, dense, and accurate. He looked a bit like a chef. It was said that men were the most charming when they were serious, but Xueqi thought that men were the most charming when they were serious and busy. Especially when Xueqi saw Li Yundong skillfully holding the wok and cooking with full concentration, she felt even more emotional in her heart. She suddenly yearned for this kind of peaceful and ordinary life. The family doesn't need to be very big, and the money doesn't need to be too much. As long as I have a man who knows me well and loves me, who can cook for me from time to time, who can coax me when I'm unhappy, isn't that enough? Xueqi looked at his back, and for a moment, there was an indescribable softness in her eyes. She stared blankly for a while and suddenly said, "Do you need my help?" Li Yundong glanced at her and said, "No, I can do it alone." Watch net. 7K. Oath M. Rainbow carrot asterisk 1_Xuepercent super hashtag fast. Update. Hearing the two of them talking, Su Chan also ran over to join in the fun. I'll help too. Li Yundong immediately laughed and pointed at her. Stand back, stay away from the kitchen. Listen, you are not allowed to step into the kitchen for the rest of your life. Su Chan was flustered and exasperated. You're so annoying. I'm helping you out of kindness. Li Yundong burst out laughing. When have you ever been more of a hindrance than a help? Aren't you being kind? Su Chan stomped her feet angrily and said to Xueqi in an aggrieved voice, Look, he's bullying me again. Xueqi knew that Su Chan had blown up the kitchen before and almost caused a disaster, so Li Yundong didn't dare to let her into the kitchen again. She pursed her lips and said with a smile, Let's wait outside. Don't make trouble for him. Times have changed. Women don't know how to cook anymore. Men are all great chefs. Li Yundong smiled proudly and said, It's good that you know. Go out and wait in the living room. Xueqi and Su Chan went to the living room and sat down. Su Chan was bored, so she began to carefully look Xueqi up and down. Su Chan thought to herself, in terms of beauty, Xueqi is not inferior to my master. In terms of temperament, she is even more cold and elegant, which is rare even in the cultivation world. What moved me the most was the wealth and power that Xueqi had shown in their dealings, as well as her own unique pure yin body. A woman with a pure yin maiden constitution was not only an excellent cauldron, but also an excellent nourishing effect for those who used yin to nourish yang. Even if she cultivated on her own, she would definitely be able to get twice the result with half the effort. If this woman is willing to be used by Yundong, then there will be no obstacles in Yundong's future cultivation. During the days that Su Chan had been with Li Yundong, She had deeply experienced the pain of not being able to do anything without money. Once a cultivator obtained the method of cultivation, they had to prepare the money for it. As the saying goes, the poor study literature while the rich learn martial arts. The poor could only study literature because it didn't consume much of their body. Only the rich were qualified to learn martial arts. Learning martial arts consumed a lot of physical strength and blood essence, and required all kinds of food and medicinal herbs to make up for the loss of the human body. Otherwise, martial arts practitioners would only be able to practice for a few years before they died. Cultivation was even more expensive than learning martial arts. The amount of money needed to cultivate for a year was absolutely astronomical. No one could imagine it. Even finding a slightly better cultivation abode would require a large amount of money. And making money while cultivating was bound to affect the progress of cultivation. Thinking of this, Xueqi couldn't help but want to build a relationship with Xueqi. She smiled and said to Xueqi, "Can I call you sister?" Xueqi already had a guilty conscience. When she heard this, her imagination immediately ran wild. Sister? What does this mean? In ancient times, didn't the first wife also call the new wife sister? But she came first. Why does she call me sister? For a moment, Xueqi was flustered. Her heart was beating like a deer, and her heart was in a mess. Her cheeks were red, and her usual calmness was nowhere to be seen. She stammered, Call me sister? This is not good, is it?" Xueqi didn't know that Xueqi had thought so much in the blink of an eye. She saw a hint of joy in Xueqi's eyes and thought to herself, "There's a way." Xueqi smiled and said, "It doesn't matter. You look like my sister." After a moment of panic, Xueqi calmed down a little and asked, "Sister? You have a sister?" Xueqi smiled and said, "Yes, Xueqi." Xueqi was surprised. "Xueqi? What Xueqi?" Xueqi thought to herself, "Oh no, I spoke too fast and said something I shouldn't have." She rolled her eyes and was about to smooth things over when Li Yundong suddenly opened the door and came out with a dish. She quickly clapped her hands and pointed at Li Yundong, saying with a smile, "The dish is here. There's food to eat." Although Li Yundong had sharp ears and eyes, it was impossible for him to hear what the two girls were talking about with the roar of the kitchen range hood. He put the dish on the coffee table in the dining room and glared at Xueqi, pretending to be angry. "I told you not to eat it. You're turning into a pig." Xueqi made a face at him. "I'll eat it secretly, humph." Li Yundong smiled and went into the kitchen. After a while, he brought out a few more dishes. Although Xueqi had wolfed down a lot of food before, Li Yundong's cooking still made her want to eat. Xueqi smelled the aroma of the dishes on the table and said with a smile, "Not bad. The color, smell, and taste are all good. I can't tell, Li Yundong." Li Yundong looked proud, but he pretended to be modest and said, "It's just I'm the third best in the world." Xueqi took a bowl of rice and picked up a pair of chopsticks. "Then I won't stand on ceremony," she said with a smile. Without waiting for Li Yundong to say anything, she picked up the most fragrant piece of beer duck. As soon as it entered her mouth, Xueqi's eyes lit up. Not bad, she praised. "It's better than the chefs in high-end restaurants." Li Yundong was grinning from ear to ear. "You flatter me, Xueqi," he said. "You're flattering me." Xueqi pursed her lips and was about to respond to Li Yundong's words when she suddenly noticed that Xueqi had not said a word. The chopsticks in her hand swept across the table like a gust of wind sweeping away fallen leaves. Xueqi's smile froze. Li Yundong suddenly shouted, "Hey, you're too cruel. You eat like this even when there are guests. Leave some for me." But as he spoke, the food on the table decreased a little. Li Yundong knew that he couldn't be polite anymore. If he did, he would have to order takeout. He quickly called out to Xueqi, "Hurry up and eat. It'll be gone soon." Xueqi didn't know how to react. "Oh," she replied casually. But by the time she came to her senses, the two of them had already swept away half of the food on the table in a few minutes. Xueqi saw that the situation was not good. She knew that if she continued to be reserved and ladylike, she wouldn't be able to eat anything today. She didn't stand on ceremony. She rolled up her sleeves and joined in the sweeping army. During the meal, the three of them made a lot of noise, and smoke rose from all directions. Xueqi had been pampered since she was a child. She had always been elegant and polite when eating. She had never eaten with her mouth wide open like this. But even though it was inelegant and rude to eat like this, Xueqi still felt that this was the happiest and most memorable meal she had ever had since she was a child. It's a pity that this meal was not specially made for me. If it was made for me alone, I could eat it calmly and taste it calmly. But now, I can only snatch it. After the meal, Xueqi looked at Xueqi, who was grinning and proud, and couldn't help but sigh in her heart. Happy reading. OM/. Chapter 93. Go to see Net. After the meal, Xueqi felt a little sad after the happiness. She stood up and said goodbye to Li Yundong with a smile. Well, I have to go. I won't disturb the two of you. Go to see Net. Rainbow ** literature _school % super #fast. Update. Li Yundong smiled and tried to persuade her to stay. It's still early. Do you want to play a little longer? Xueqi shook her head. No, I'll come back another day. Li Yundong didn't try to persuade her to stay. He smiled and said, well, see you at school tomorrow. Xueqi went out and changed her shoes. She looked back and said with a smile, thank you for your hospitality today. I had a good time. Li Yundong smiled and waved his hand. You're welcome. Xueqi watched as Xueqi walked out of the door. She was keenly aware of the reluctance in Xueqi's eyes as she left. The girl pulled Li Yundong into her room. Li Yundong didn't know why the girl pulled him into her room. After entering the door, the girl whispered like a thief. Yundong, you should see her off. Li Yundong didn't know whether to laugh or cry. I thought you had something to do. Seeing that Li Yundong didn't understand what she meant, the girl couldn't help but say anxiously, oh, such a good cauldron and Taoist companion. It's a pity that you let go of them. Li Yundong was stunned, and the expression on his face became very strange. What do you mean? Xueqi stamped her feet. Oh, you should go after her. If you get her, we'll be rich, and you'll have a good Xian enchantress cauldron. Li Yundong felt like his heart was being tugged. He thought to himself, is this girl really stupid, or does she really not take me seriously? Is there anyone who would push their boyfriend to another woman like this? Li Yundong was unhappy, but he deliberately said, really? Then I'm going. Xueqi hurriedly pushed Li Yundong all the way to the door. Go, go, go. You'll be far away. Li Yundong put on his shoes and looked back at her. Hey, I'm really going? Xueqi giggled. Go, go. Then she closed the door. Go to see Net. 7K. OM. Literature. As soon as the door was closed, the little girl leaned against it, thinking self-righteously and happily, if Yundong and Xueqi really become Taoist companions, then we won't have to worry about money in the future. Then Yundong won't have to go to school and can concentrate on cultivation. At that time, his cultivation will definitely advance by leaps and bounds. Thinking of this, the little girl couldn't help giggling. But when she was laughing happily, she suddenly thought that if Li Yundong and Xueqi became Taoist companions, would Li Yundong be intimate with her? Just like when he was making out with himself? Thinking of this, the little girl's heart suddenly trembled. Xueqi is so beautiful, elegant, and powerful. If Yundong becomes her Taoist companion, will he abandon me? Thinking of this, the little girl's heart beat wildly. Her chest felt like it was being ruthlessly pulled by someone, making it very difficult for her to breathe. If Yundong doesn't want me. The smile on the little girl's face disappeared little by little. She couldn't help thinking back to the days when she and Li Yundong had been together. The fragments of the accumulated happy memories were like a film, flashing quickly in front of Xueqi's eyes, one picture after another. The smile on the little girl's face disappeared unconsciously, and tears fell down. She suddenly realized that she couldn't leave this boy. She couldn't imagine what her life would be like without Li Yundong. Xueqi couldn't help but open the door, wanting to rush out and chase after Li Yundong. But as soon as she opened the door, she found that Li Yundong was standing at the door, as if he hadn't left at all. He was looking at her with a smile and tenderness in his eyes. The two of them stood at the door, staring at each other. In that instant, it was as if time had stopped. There was only a sour, sweet aura flowing between the two of them. It was like an invisible thread that wrapped around them tighter and tighter. Xueqi stood at the door, tears streaming down her face. She bit her lip hard and looked at Li Yundong with tears in her eyes. After standing there for a long time, she suddenly threw herself into Li Yundong's arms and cried loudly, "I know I was wrong. Please don't abandon me." Li Yundong smiled, holding the little girl's waist with one hand and gently stroking her back with the other. He said softly, "Silly girl, how could I? How could I bear to leave you?" Xueqi couldn't stop crying in Li Yundong's arms. Her crying was full of palpitations and fear. Li Yundong smiled and touched the little girl's hair. "Well, don't cry at the door. If someone sees you, they'll laugh at you." Xueqi's crying gradually subsided. She twisted her body and said in a choked voice, "Carry me in. Go to the internet. 7K. Oath M. Super_speed. More. New." Li Yundong chuckled and picked the little girl up. He closed the door with his heel and carried the little girl to the sofa in the living room. Although Xueqi was about 1.65 meters tall, Li Yundong was too strong. Plus, Xueqi was petite, so Li Yundong's arms felt as light as a feather. The little girl hugged Li Yundong's strong and round waist tightly, as if she was afraid that he would fly away in the next second. She greedily breathed in Li Yundong's strong masculine breath for a while, and the breath she exhaled gradually became hotter. Her cheeks were crimson, and she looked up with watery eyes. In a sweet voice, she said coquettishly, "I want to kiss you." As she said this, the little girl's long eyelashes trembled slightly, and a crystal teardrop hung at the corner of her eye. Her face was full of shyness. Li Yundong loved this little girl to the extreme. He lowered his head and gently kissed the remaining teardrop at the corner of the little girl's eye. Then, holding the teardrop in his hand, he gently kissed the little girl on the mouth. Xueqi licked her lips with her tongue and licked the tears away. She giggled. "Bitter." Li Yundong laughed. "Then I'll let you taste something that's not bitter." As he said this, he lowered his head and took the little girl's red lips into his mouth. His tongue deftly pried open the little girl's lips and teeth, and quickly slipped inside. Xueqi let out a moan and clumsily tangled with Li Yundong's tongue. Her body felt as if it was melting, and she went limp in Li Yundong's arms. When their lips parted, panting, a thin, crystalline line was pulled out of the corner of their mouths. Li Yundong reached out and broke it, then wiped the corner of the little girl's mouth. "How was it? Was it bitter?" he asked with a smile. The little girl's eyes were like silk, and she giggled. "Stinky." Li Yundong pretended to be angry and said, "Wow, you actually said that I'm stinky? I'll let you know if it's stinky or not." After that, he leaned down and kissed the little girl again. Xueqi tasted the sweetness of the taste, and boldly took the initiative to flatter him. Li Yundong's whole body was hot, and his hands unconsciously climbed up to Xueqi's soft, towering chest and rubbed it. Xueqi suddenly felt as if she had been electrocuted, and all the strength in her body was gone. Her eyes were flowing crystal clear, as if water was about to drip out of them. She let out a whimper from her nose. "No, I can't." At this time, Li Yundong's desire was soaring. He bit the little girl's ear and said, good Chonner, give it to me, okay?" Xueqi was confused by Li Yundong's moans. Her mind was in a mess, her body was soft, and her lower abdomen was hot. She felt like her whole body was on fire. She opened her eyes slightly and looked at the boy in front of her, who made her cry and laugh at the same time. In her heart, she felt that it would be okay to give her Yuan and her virginity to him. Her nose opened and closed, and the breath she exhaled became hotter and hotter. Her plump red lips opened slightly, and just as she was about to speak, she suddenly heard a knock on the door. Xueqi's whole body suddenly trembled. She suddenly remembered, if Li Yundong had sex with me now, it would be harmful to his cultivation. At this thought, Xueqi suddenly felt a burst of strength. She shyly pushed Li Yundong away and ran into the bedroom. Li Yundong was suspended in the air, unable to go up or down. He sat on the sofa dejectedly, gnashing his teeth in hatred for the guy who knocked on the door. Li Yundong, who had failed in his plot, took a deep breath and forcibly suppressed his rising desire. After his eyes recovered a little bit of clarity, he stood up and opened the door. Li Yundong opened the door and was greeted by the sight of a beautiful girl standing in the doorway. She was as beautiful as Xueqi. She was about 1.6 meters tall and had a ponytail. She looked to be about 16 or 17 years old. She was wearing a high school uniform and a pair of red stockings on her calves, which made her look slender and elegant. Li Yundong opened the door and saw a girl standing in the doorway. Li Yundong felt that the girl was a little familiar, so he asked in confusion, You are. This girl was Hong Ling. This was also the first time she had seen Li Yundong up close. A pair of extremely intelligent eyes couldn't help but look Li Yundong up and down. This boy's temples are full, and his middle is wide and deep. His eyes are bright, and his bones are strong and well-proportioned. He is a good cultivator, but I don't know if he is the same cultivator who was practicing qi that night. Strange, why does he smell so much makeup? By the way, he entered the room hand in hand with two girls before. Could it be that they are? Although it was common in the cultivation world for Taoist companions to rely on bedroom techniques to carry out dual cultivation, having sex with two Taoist companions at the same time was not cultivation, but obscene. Hong Ling spat in her heart, but although she was secretly disdainful, she was still polite. She cupped her hands, formed a palm in front of her chest, and clasped her thumbs inward. She said in a clear voice, Ba, I'm Ruan Hong Ling, a disciple of Zhenren Wang. Greetings, fellow Taoist. May I ask your sex origin? Ruan Hong Ling was dressed the same as a modern high school student, but her speech and behavior seemed to be from hundreds of years ago. Li Yundong was confused and frowned. Where did this crazy girl come from? She's so beautiful, but why does she talk like a madman? Seeing Li Yundong frown, Hong Ling thought that she hadn't explained her origin clearly, so she added, I'm Ruan Hong Ling, a disciple of the 45th generation under Zhenren Wang of the Shangqing sect of Mount Longhu. Greetings, fellow Taoist. May I know your name? Li Yundong was stunned and thought, what Southern Taoist? What Mount Longhu? What Zhenren sect of Shangqing? Is this girl really crazy or just pretending to be crazy? He didn't know what was going on at the door, but Su Chan, who was in the room, heard it clearly. The little girl, who had been excited before, only felt a thunderbolt from the clear sky at this time. Her desire instantly disappeared, and she shouted in fear in her heart, It's her, she's coming. Happy reading. Chapter 94. Go to Watch Network. When Su Chan heard that Ruan Hong Ling had come knocking on her door, she was so terrified that her heart nearly burst out of her chest. Her first instinct was to transform into a streak of green light and flee. Thankfully, she managed to suppress the urge. She wanted to hear what Ruan Hong Ling had to say before making a decision. Su Chan leaned against the bedroom door, her ears perking up as she eavesdropped on the conversation between Li Yundong and Ruan Hong Ling. Her heart raced as she listened. In terms of Dharma power, Ruan Hong Ling's Dharma power and magic were above Su Chan's, but not by much. It would not be difficult to defeat Su Chan, but it would be extremely difficult to capture her. However, Su Chan was afraid of the Xueqi school behind Ruan Hong Ling. Although Taoism in China was divided into two sects, the North and the South, the North, led by Mao Mountain, were inferior to many sects in terms of power and strength. Although the North and the South were divided into many sects and clans, Mount Gazao, Mount Longhu, and Mount Mao were the most respected. Among them, the Xueqi school was located in Mount Longhu in Jiangxi. It was the supreme leader of the Southern Taoism sect, known as the Master of the Three Mountains Talisman, ruling over all the Taoism sects in the world. Although Taoism had declined after the Ming and Qing dynasties and the Republic of China, the Taoist cultivators who had sneaked into the mortal world and deep in the mountains were still very powerful. A while ago, the Ren Yuan Jindan had appeared in the world. The cultivators of various sects who had been hiding in the depths of the world suddenly came out of their caves like snakes and insects after hibernation, and started a bloody fight. Su Chan knew that if it weren't for her master who had led many cultivators away, she would have been smashed to pieces by now. There was no need for the Xueqi school to make a move. Just Hong Ling and Zi Yuan, who were chasing after her, could make her have nowhere to go. Su Chan's heart was beating fast, but how could Li Yundong know such complicated entanglements? He frowned at Ruan Hong Ling and asked, What are you talking about? Who are you looking for? Ruan Hong Ling was stunned. She found that the man in front of her didn't seem to know her background at all, let alone what it meant. Could it be that he's not a cultivator? Ruan Hong Ling was shocked and couldn't help taking a step back. She looked at Li Yundong's eyes carefully. After a while, she found that Li Yundong didn't seem to be faking it. She suddenly became suspicious. This is impossible. If he wasn't a cultivator, how could he cultivate such a good furnace? His essence, qi, and spirit were even stronger than some great cultivators. But if he is a cultivator, how could he not know about our Zhengyi school? Li Yundong was angry that Wan Hongling had disturbed his good time, so he naturally didn't show her a good face, nor did he want to let her into the house. He blocked the door and looked at Wan Hongling as if she was crazy. He didn't say a word, as if he wanted to see her out. Wan Hongling was secretly unhappy with his gaze. She frowned slightly and no longer bowed to perform the Taoist etiquette. Instead, she nodded like a normal person and said, "I'm sorry, I found the wrong person." Watch net. 7K. O-// Li Yundong glanced at her and then closed the door. He muttered in an extremely depressed tone, "Damn it, it's all because of this stinky girl that the meat in my mouth flew away." Wan Hongling was closed at the door, but she was not in a hurry to leave. She stared at the door of Li Yundong's room, and the suspicion in her heart grew stronger and stronger. After a while, she turned around and left with a cold snort. Lecherous people, even cultivators can't achieve great things. At the same time, in a private manor in the northern suburbs of Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, the United States, Chris got out of the car. She waved to the private driver who had picked her up and said with a smile, "Goodbye, Uncle Tom. Say hello to Aunt Shauna for me." After watching the car leave, Chris walked into the manor. As soon as she entered the entrance of the manor, a servant who was busy pruning in the garden greeted her with a smile. "Chris, you're back? How was your trip to China?" Chris took a deep breath, closed her eyes, and said with a smile, "It's all right, Uncle Andy. After all, the air at home is good. By the way, is my grandmother here?" Uncle Andy said with a smile, "Yes, she's still in the same place. You haven't come to see her for a long time. She talks about you every day." Chris smiled and waved to Uncle Andy, then ran toward the antique manor like a happy elf. Chris trotted all the way to the back garden. As soon as she entered the garden, a screen with a strong Chinese style appeared in front of her. The screen was embroidered with the pattern of a peacock spreading its tail, and it was surrounded by beautifully carved mahogany. Next to the screen, there were bonsai rockery, blue and white porcelain, tonka, meticulous painting of ladies, and other decorative ornaments. The placement was ingenious, making people feel as if they were immersed in a strong Chinese cultural atmosphere. Chris looked over the screen and saw more than 20 wooden stakes, which were more than 1 meter high and as thick as the mouth of a bowl, standing in the garden. The wooden stakes were arranged in the shape of plum blossoms, and a woman was jumping on the plum blossoms. Chris raised her head and watched her grandmother walk the plum blossom fist on the plum blossom stump. She waited until her grandmother finished walking the plum blossom stump and jumped off the stump without a blush on her face. Only then did Chris clap her hands vigorously. "Grandma, you're so awesome!" Chris praised sincerely in English. "You're even more awesome than a young man in his 20s. Crazy's grandmother, Lin Guaring, was dressed in a purplish-red tang suit and a pair of green cloth shoes with 1,000 layers of soles. Although she was already over 90 years old, she looked no different from a woman in her 40s or 50s. Her eyes were dark and bright, and her eyebrows revealed a shrewd and capable aura. Watching the internet. Literature. When Lin Guaring saw Chris, she smiled and said in Chinese, "Chris, didn't we agree to speak Chinese in private?" Only then did Chris switch back to Chinese and asked with a smile, "Grandma, I've always wanted to ask, how did you do it?" Lin Guaring looked at her granddaughter with a doting expression. "What do you mean?" Chris pointed to the plum blossoms, which were taller than a person, and said with a smile, "I can't even climb up." "How did you get up there? You can even do boxing on it?" Lin Guaring smiled and said, "Practice makes perfect. It's no big deal." Chris shook her head and smiled. "I don't believe it. How many people in this world can look like you? You're in your 90s, but you look like you're in your 40s or 50s. You can even practice plum blossom boxing without breaking a sweat." Lin Guaring patted Chris on the head and said kindly, "Chris, I told you that you don't know much about Chinese culture. You're still not convinced. If a person who practices boxing sweats all over after a round, it means that this person doesn't know how to do boxing at all. At least, he doesn't know how to cultivate qi." When Chris heard Lin Guaring mention qi cultivation, she suddenly thought of Li Yundong, who she had met in China. She thought for a moment and asked, "Grandma, Do you think there is anyone in this world who can dodge bullets? Lin Guiying looked at Chris in surprise, shook her head, and said with a smile, impossible. No matter how powerful a person is, how can he compete with firearms? Chris said, but when I was in Tianan City, China, I saw a person dodge 7 bullets in a row with my own eyes, and he did it at a close distance of less than 10 meters. Lin Guiying's expression suddenly changed, and she blurted out, how is that possible? Unless. Chris's heart skipped a beat, and she immediately said, unless what? The expression on Lin Guiying's face changed, and her eyes suddenly became distant and vicissitudes of life. She seemed to recall a distant memory that had been sealed in her mind. Unless he is an immortal. Chris's face showed a look of disapproval. Grandma, how can there be immortals in this world? Lin Guiying shook her head. The land of China is full of crouching tigers and hidden dragons. How can ordinary people like you and I imagine it? She sighed and said slowly, in the 11th year of the Republic of China, when I was visiting Mount Huangshan, I met a group of gangsters. At that time, this group of gangsters not only wanted to rob me, but also wanted to rape me. Chris knew that her grandmother was a famous local big shot. In the whole family, her words carried the most weight. When she and her grandfather had first immigrated here, the American gangs were rampant and their power was rampant. It was her grandmother who was not inferior to men and led the local Chinese people to fight against the gangs. Only then did she lay down the foundation. When Lin Guiying was young, she was a hero, but when she was old, she had always kept her mouth shut about her experiences. In the past, no matter how much Chris tried to act coquettishly, it was useless. If Lin Guiying didn't want to talk, then she wouldn't. But now that her grandmother had taken the initiative to talk about the past, Chris's curiosity was aroused. She obediently moved a stool in front of Lin Guiying and then moved one for herself. She asked, then what happened? You beat them all away with your fists and feet? Sitting on the square chair, Lin Guiying said with a smile, how could that be possible? I was weak at that time. I was a standard girl from a respectable family. How could I know any boxing skills? Chris blinked her eyes. So you met a hero who saved the beauty? Wow, how romantic. Was it a tall and handsome guy? Lin Guiying nodded, then shook her head and said with a smile, no, it was a Taoist nun from a Taoist temple. If it had been a handsome guy, I'm afraid you wouldn't be here. Although Lin Guiying was old, her mind kept pace with the times. She joked with the younger generation unscrupulously and was very childlike. Chris said with a smile, fortunately that was the case. Otherwise, my grandfather would be sad in the underworld. Lin Guiying smiled and continued, after this Taoist nun drove the gangsters away, she saw that I liked to travel around, but I didn't have any self-defense skills, so she taught me Plum Blossom Fist. At that time, I was young and only practiced this set of Plum Blossom Fist as a self-defense skill. But the older I get, the more I feel the magic of this set of fist techniques. Chris was very smart and understood immediately. She asked, do you mean that the reason why you look so young and have such a good body is because you practice this set of fist techniques? Lin Guiying said with a smile, this is not an ordinary fist technique. I even suspect that this set of fist techniques itself was created by the gods. Chris laughed. Grandma, you're talking nonsense again. Lin Guiying patted Chris's leg. How am I talking nonsense? Zhao Kuangyin, the founding emperor of the Northern Song dynasty, was still a small soldier. He was idle all day and liked to play chess with others. One day, when he passed by Mount Hua, he heard that there was a local named Chen Tuan, so he went to play chess with him. After Chen Tuan defeated Zhao Kuangyin on the chessboard, he saw that he had the bearing of an emperor, so he taught him a set of fist techniques. Then with this set of fist techniques, Zhao Kuangyin rose rapidly in the future, all the way until he became the founding emperor of the Song dynasty. Lin Guiying looked at Chris and said with a smile, you boast that you are an expert in China. Do you know who Chen Tuan is? Chris claimed to be an expert in China, but that was only compared to the Americans around her. After all, she was young. How could she be proficient in these things? She suddenly blushed and shook her head. I don't know. Lin Guiying said, this is a great immortal who is as famous as Lu Dongbin. He is called Ancestor Chen Tuan, and Ancestor Shi is him. Chris was not convinced and said, but Grandma, these are all fairy tales. They can't be counted. Lin Guiying looked at Chris meaningfully and shook her head. No, you haven't met a real person, so you don't know the feeling of meeting a real person. I was as young as you. When I met a real person, I only thought that I had met a martial arts master. But now that I think about it, I always feel that the master who taught me fist techniques must be a real cultivator. As she spoke, Lin Guiying raised her head and let out a long sigh. If I knew where the master who taught me the fist technique is right now, I would definitely abandon everything and beg her to accept me as a disciple and cultivate with her. Chris said in surprise, But Grandma, are you not satisfied with your current life? Why do you want to live such a poor life? Lin Guiying shook her head and said, You haven't practiced Plum Blossom Fist, so you don't understand the true meaning of strength. You haven't lived to my age, so you don't understand the true meaning of life. Cultivation is not only about gaining strength and understanding the true meaning of life. More importantly, it can make you immortal. When Lin Guiying said this, she was excited all over, and her eyes shone with a sharp and amazing light. The sharpness of her eyes was even more powerful than that of a young man in his 20s. Chris was stunned when she heard this. Suddenly, her heart skipped a beat. It's precisely because my grandmother has practiced this set of fist techniques that she looks like a person in their 40s or 50s at the age of 90. Can the so-called cultivation really make people immortal? Is there really such an incredible kung fu in the world? For a moment, Chris couldn't help but be stunned. She thought of the incredible things she had seen in Li Yundong, and her atheistic worldview was seriously shaken. She said in a daze, Are there really immortals in this world? If there are really immortals, is Li Yundong an immortal? After Lin Guiying finished speaking, the light in her eyes gradually dissipated. She stood up with some interest, stroked Chris's head lovingly, and said, Chris, if you meet a real person, don't hesitate. You must find a way to worship him as your master. Otherwise, you will definitely be like me in the future, watching as you grow old and lose your youth. It will be too late for me to regret it at this time. After that, Lin Guiying slowly walked away with her hands behind her back. Chris looked at her grandmother's back and couldn't help thinking, Is Li Yundong a real person? Can cultivation really make you immortal? If it can really make you immortal, then... Chris couldn't help touching her cheeks with both hands. She couldn't help but turn her head and look at a mirror hanging by the wall. She saw a young and beautiful blonde beauty in the mirror. This beauty was in her youth, so she was bright and beautiful. But what about 10 years later? What about 20 years later? What about 30 years later? Immortality? Chris's heart suddenly thumped wildly. Happy reading. OM/. Chapter 95. Go to sea. Are there really immortals in this world? Li Yundong had been very sure about this question in the past, but when a series of incredible things appeared in his life and happened to him, no matter how firm he was, he couldn't help but be a little shaken. Go to sea. Literature. Southern Taoist sect. What sect on Longhu Mountain? What Jingyi school? What Ling sect? What Ling sect? What Wang Zhenren? What kind of disciple is Ruan Hongling? Li Yundong murmured with a strange look on his face. What the hell is this? Why does it sound so serious? Why does it sound like wuxia? After sending off the uninvited guest, Li Yundong realized that he couldn't flirt with Su Chan anymore. Su Chan was hiding in her room, refusing to come out. Li Yundong was bored, so he picked up the history book and started flipping through it. After a while, he felt like his mind was in a mess. He couldn't focus at all, so he tossed the history book aside and fell into a daze on the sofa in the living room. Where did Su Chan come from? Where did this strange power come from? And what's with that girl just now? Li Yundong had a vague feeling that something inexplicable was slowly closing in on him, surrounding him tightly. Forget it. I don't care. Li Yundong thought about it for a long time, but still couldn't figure it out. He sighed and picked up the textbook on the history of China's ancient literature and began to memorize it. Let's figure out a way to deal with the final exam first. Another day passed in a daze. Su Chan had been living in fear all day, but in the end, the thing she feared most never came. Li Yundong and Su Chan left the house at 7 o'clock. By the time they arrived at school, it was already past 8 o'clock. The campus was bustling with students. Li Yundong. Feng Na waved at him as soon as he reached the bottom of the school building. Good morning. Li Yundong greeted her with a smile. Feng Na trotted up to Li Yundong and nodded at him with a smile. She then placed a CD in Li Yundong's hand and said nervously, "Keep this for me." Li Yundong's expression suddenly became very interesting. He winked at Feng Na and said, "What movie? It's not an action movie, is it?" Feng Na rolled her eyes at him. Before she could explain, she heard a shout. "Nana, you are so mean. What's wrong with letting me have a look?" Cheng yelled as she chased after Li Yundong and Su Chan. She froze for a second when she saw them. Then she nodded at them. Then she grabbed Feng Na and started pinching her. "You're so mean. Can't you just let me have a look at her for a couple of days?" Feng Na smiled apologetically and begged for mercy. "Aya, I told you I lent it out, but you didn't believe me. Besides, I haven't even watched it myself." Cheng was doubtful. "Lent it out? Who did you lend it to?" Feng Na pretended to be calm and said, "You don't know him. He lent it to a senior in the 4th year. Watch net. 7K. Oath M. When. She glanced at Li Yundong guiltily after she finished speaking. Naturally, Cheng followed Feng Na's gaze to Li Yundong. She noticed that Li Yundong was holding a CD in his hand. "What is this?" Cheng asked suspiciously. Then, she looked at Feng Na with a puzzled expression. "He's not the senior you were talking about, is he?" Feng Na's face darkened. "Do you think I'm lying through my teeth?" "Tell me the truth," Cheng said. "What's that in your hand?" Li Yundong had a rough idea of what had happened between the two sisters. He had always been in the spirit of mischief, so he coughed dryly and approached Cheng. He lowered his voice and said with a mysterious look on his face, "Sister, do you want to play?" Cheng was taken aback. Then she burst out laughing. "What kind of CD do you have?" "I have Western CD, Japanese CD, and Japanese CD. Which one do you want?" Li Yundong said, beaming with delight. Cheng blushed. Cheng spat. "Don't be so shameless." Then she stomped her feet and glared at Feng Na. "If you don't lend it to me, I'll go through it myself. I don't believe you can hide it anywhere." Then, she turned around and ran away. Feng Na breathed a sigh of relief. She gave him a thumbs up and said with a look of admiration on her face, "Old man, you are so smart, brave and calm. In the past, you would have been a qualified and outstanding underground gangster. I'm impressed." Li Yundong laughed and fiddled with the CD in his hand. "What the hell is this CD? Why is it so sneaky and secretive?" Feng Na giggled. "Girls love it. You don't." Li Yundong deliberately put on a straight face. "Who said that? I'm a man of universal love. I'm going to collect this CD on behalf of the Ministry of Public Security. I'll go back and figure out what it's about before I give it back to you." Feng Na had never thought that she would fall into the tiger's mouth after escaping from the claws of a wolf. She was stunned. "Hey, you're too cruel," she said in shock and anger. "I just got it from my classmate, and you just took it away? No, give it back to me. If you don't, I'll scream that you're molesting me." Li Yundong laughed. "You don't have to scream. I'll do it for you. Go to the internet." "Hey, Cheng." Li Yundong yelled at Cheng, who was standing not far away from him. He waved the CD in his hand. Cheng turned around and said, "What do you want?" Li Yundong didn't answer. He just glanced at Feng Na with a grin. Feng Na stomped her feet and gritted her teeth. "Fine. You win. I'll lend it to you for a day at most." Li Yundong smiled. "Thank you." Feng Na said angrily, "It's my bad luck. I walked right into the trap today." Then, she turned around and walked away. Li Yundong said loudly to Cheng, "It's nothing. The party and the people want me to greet you." Cheng spat and laughed. "Bah." Then, she also walked away quickly. Li Yundong had gotten a CD-ROM as a trophy for no reason. He looked at the CD-ROM in his hand with great interest. His curiosity was aroused, and he couldn't help muttering, "What are these two girls up to? What the hell is in this? It can't be a Japanese action movie, can it? Girls watch this too?" As the saying goes, curiosity killed the cat. Li Yundong spent the whole morning trying to figure out the contents of the CD in his hand. When class was over, he called out to Su Chan, who had just woken up. All right, sleepyhead, he said. Class is over. What shall we have for lunch? Su-chan had been worried all night since Wan Hongling's visit yesterday. She looked a little listless now. She rubbed her eyes. I don't know, she said. Let's just grab something. Just then, Xueqi, who was sitting in the front row, walked over with a smile. Let's have lunch together? My treat. Li Yundong laughed. You're the host again? How can I accept that? I still have class in the afternoon. Let's just grab something. Xueqi laughed. I wasn't the host yesterday. It was all thanks to Lu Chuan. And it was Chef Li himself who cooked. I didn't do anything. Li Yundong couldn't help but laugh at the mention of Lu Chuan. Now that you mention it, I suddenly feel sorry for him. How could you let him bleed like that? Xueqi thought of Lu Chuan's amazing performance yesterday. She couldn't help but smile. It's okay. He's a rich man. He won't go broke. As the two of them were talking, they suddenly saw a boy walking towards them. He was holding a bouquet of roses big enough to cover his entire upper body. Xueqi frowned slightly. You can't talk about people in the day, but you can't talk about ghosts at night. Before Li Yundong could react, he saw the boy walk up to them. The boy lowered the bouquet of roses a little, revealing a handsome face. It was Lu Chuan. Li Yundong couldn't help but laugh as soon as he saw Lu Chuan. Hey Lu Chuan, are you going to treat us to dinner today? Lu Chuan's eyes twitched. Then, as if he hadn't seen Li Yundong, he knelt down on one knee in front of Su-chan. Then, holding the bouquet in his hands, he said, Su-chan, your beauty is unparalleled. Your purity is unparalleled. Please accept these 999 roses. They represent my love for you. Li Yundong and Su-chan were both startled. Anger rose in Li Yundong's heart. His eyebrows slowly rose, and there was a hint of anger in his voice. Hey, do you know what you're doing? Lu Chuan gave Li Yundong a disdainful look. Everyone in this world has the right to pursue love. I'm exercising that right. Don't you understand? Su-chan was Li Yundong's reverse scale. He would never allow anyone to touch her. If anyone did, he would lose control of himself. Fine. 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 Li Yundong laughed. Xueqi saw the angry look on Li Yundong's face. His fists were clenched so tightly that they made popping noises. She pulled his arm and whispered, calm down. Look. Then, she pointed to a corner not far away. Li Yundong turned his head and saw a few students taking pictures of them with their phones. Li Yundong was getting more and more angry. So you came prepared. Very good. Hey, Lu Chuan. Do you want to take a video of you getting beaten up and take it home as a souvenir? Lu Chuan glanced at Li Yundong. Fear crept into his heart. Then, as if something had just occurred to him, he rolled his eyes. You dare hit me, he yelled. Try me if you have the balls. Just as he was about to lift his hand, Su-chan pulled him back. She smiled at him and shook her head. I'll do it, she said. Li Yundong took a deep breath and forced down his anger. Fine, he said. Hurry up and get him out of here. I don't want him to ruin my mood. Su-chan's eyes flashed with a sly light. She took the rose from Lu Chuan's hand and couldn't help but exclaim, what a beautiful flower. Lu Chuan's heart leaped with joy when he saw Su-chan accept his bouquet of flowers. He gave Li Yundong a smug look, then said to Su-chan, even the most beautiful flowers can't compare to your beauty. Su-chan giggled. It smells good, she said. Smell it. Then, she held the flower in front of Lu Chuan. Lu Chuan was mesmerized by Su-chan's smile. She really was more beautiful than a flower. He couldn't help but lower his head and take a deep breath. It was as if he wasn't smelling the fragrance of a flower, but the fragrance of a person. But when he looked up, he suddenly felt something on the tip of his nose. He tried his best to open his eyes and look at the center of his nose. He saw a hornet the size of a toddler's fist on his nose. The hornet was frighteningly large. He could see the hairs on its body and the stinger on its tail. If he got stung, his head would swell like a pig's head. Lu Chuan was scared out of his wits. He didn't dare to use his hands to grab it, and he didn't dare to make any movements either. He was afraid that he would provoke the hornet and turn him into a pig's head. He glared at the hornet and pursed his lips. He blew at the hornet on his nose, trying to drive it away. It was a hilarious sight. Su Chan looked at Lu Chuan with a smile. Does it smell good? Lu Chuan was sweating profusely. His body was stiff, and he didn't dare to move a muscle. Su Chan smiled when Lu Chuan didn't reply. Not good? If it doesn't smell good, I'll give it back to you. After saying that, she threw the flowers in her hand into his arms. Just as Lu Chuan caught the bouquet of flowers, countless hornets flew out from the pile of flowers, like a dark cloud, rushing towards him. Lu Chuan felt a sharp pain all over his body. It was obvious that he had been stung by a hornet. He was scared out of his wits. He threw the flowers far away and cried, I'm stung to death. I'm going to be stung to death. Help! Help! He frantically scratched his own body with both hands, howling like a ghost and howling like a wolf as he ran away in a cloud of dust. About that. During the weekend, the flowers of the children exploded together, which surprised me a little. But in the last few minutes, the tables were turned, and I was kicked from 9th to 10th. Children, you guys are not good this week. I was supposed to have 2 bursts of 3 chapters, but now I only have 1. How tragic. Well, according to our agreement, tomorrow at midnight. Happy reading. OM/. Chapter 96. Go to watch net. As soon as Lu Chuan took a whiff of the flower in Su Chan's hand, he started yelling and screaming like he was possessed. When Su Chan tossed the flower back into his arms, Lu Chuan started yelling and screaming like a madman. Go to watch net. Literature. The students around them were shocked and amused at the same time. What's wrong with him? Li Yundong asked. Su Chan smiled slyly. Who knows? Maybe he was stung by a bee from the flowers he sent? She stared at Lu Chuan's back and laughed. I can't be that unlucky, can I? Su Chan stuck her tongue out. She had cast an illusion spell on Lu Chuan, making him think that he was being stung by a swarm of wasps. That was why he had made such a fool of himself. Cultivators were forbidden from harming mortals, but there were still loopholes that could be exploited. For example, illusions, bewitchment, and seduction spells that did not cause direct harm to a person would not violate the rules of heaven. Fox spirits were born to be masters of seduction spells, but they were also masters of illusions. Su Chan's cultivation was not high enough, so she was born with seduction spells. She had never learned them before, but she had learned a lot of illusions to save her life. Today, she had put Lu Chuan to good use. Li Yundong stared at Lu Chuan's back, a little confused. But Zhou Qin smiled and said, All right, the eyesore is gone. Let's go eat. Come on, Li Yundong said. Let's go to the cafeteria and grab a bite. Miss Zhou, you've never eaten in a school cafeteria before, have you? You're so out of touch with the people. You need to be criticized. Severely criticized. Zhou Qin pursed her lips into a smile. What right do you have to criticize me if you've never stayed on campus? After that, the two of them burst into laughter. Xueqi, who had been watching from the sidelines, stared at Li Yundong with a love-struck expression. Even his laughter is so cute. The girl who had mocked Su Chan in the cafeteria rolled her eyes at Xueqi. Are you crazy? You like a man who relies on women to settle things? Xueqi rolled her eyes. Kalu, you haven't been on campus for a while. How would you know that he's a legend at Tiannan University? Sigh, why didn't I meet such a guy in the past? If the girl beside him was me, how cool would I be? I'm so envious. Kalu sneered and said, You mean those bullet-dodging stories that are spreading like wildfire on the forums? TSK, have you guys watched too many movies? How can you believe such a thing? Xueqi said unhappily, A lot of people saw it, okay? Kalu said disdainfully, Many people said they saw UF and the Loch Ness Monster. I don't believe this kind of person has any ability. Look at the way Zhou Qin is throwing herself at him. TSK, what a pretty boy. Xueqi was furious. Hey, if you keep talking like that, I'm not going to talk to you anymore. Kalu said in surprise. No way, you're going to fall out with me because of this gigolo. Li Yundong heard their conversation clearly. He looked back at Kalu, who was cursing him behind his back. His sharp gaze made her hair stand on end. She subconsciously turned her head to look for who was glaring at her, but Li Yundong had already turned his head. Watch net. Literature. Lu Chuan ran all the way. When he ran out of the school gate, He was suddenly grabbed by someone and kicked him. Lu Chuan rolled on the ground, grabbed himself with both hands, and let out a heart-wrenching roar. Help! Help! Young master, he looked at Lu Chuan, who was rolling on the ground, in shock and horror. He kicked him with the tip of his foot and said, "Hey, what the hell are you doing?" Lu Chuan grabbed young master He's calf and shouted like crazy. "Hornets! So many hornets!" Young master He picked Lu Chuan up and slapped him 4 times in the face, spitting saliva all over his face. F***CK. Why are you F***king the same as CFA? You're all F***king mud that can't stick to the wall. Where are the hornets? Are you stupid? The 4 slaps sobered Lu Chuan up a little. He touched his face with trembling hands and was surprised to find that his face was smooth and flat, without a single bruise. Lu Chuan was surprised and happy. He cried out involuntarily, "I'm fine? Ha 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 ha, I'm fine." Young master He rubbed his temples with one hand and grabbed Lu Chuan's collar with the other. He scolded, F***CK. Why have I been meeting so many idiots recently? Hey, I asked you to deal with Li Yundong. Did you do it? I think you probably screwed it up too, right? When Lu Chuan heard the name Li Yundong, he suddenly shivered. He remembered his hallucination as if he had been possessed by a ghost. His heart trembled and he said fearfully, "Young master He, it's not that I screwed it up, it's that things are really weird." Young master He scolded. "What the F***CK? I only asked you to disgust Li Yundong and provoke him to make a move. I have a way to deal with him. You can't even do such a small thing. Why don't you go to hell?" Lu Chuan was scolded badly, but he still had a smile on his face and said timidly, "Young master He, you should find someone else. I realize that whenever I meet this guy, something bad will happen." Mother Kerr. Do you have balls? Young master He was furious. He slapped him again and used his arm to restrain him. "You idiot, listen to me. Go and mess with him after school in the afternoon. I'll watch from the side. I promise he won't dare to do anything to you. As long as he makes a move, I can mess with him." Lu Chuan's heart skipped a beat when he heard this. He asked tentatively, "Really? What good idea does young master He have? Li Yundong is not someone to be trifled with." Young master He waved at him impatiently. "Come here, I'll teach you a way. Go to the internet. 7K. Oath M. Super_speed. More. New." Lu Chuan leaned over to listen and was stunned. He cried out involuntarily, "Young master He, I was just scolded by my father yesterday. Isn't this not good?" Young master He glared at him. "What did you say?" Lu Chuan's head immediately shrank and he stammered, "No, nothing. I'll think of a way." Time passed quickly. The afternoon passed while Li Yundong and Su Chan were fooling around in the back row. After class, Xueqi, who was in the front row, hesitated for a moment, but still stood there waiting for Li Yundong. After he and Su Chan walked over from the back row, she stepped forward, smiled, and said, "Shall I give you a ride?" Li Yundong waved his hand and said with a smile, "No need. How can I always trouble you?" Xueqi smiled and said, "By saying such polite words, you don't treat me as a friend?" Li Yundong was a little helpless. "Well, then I'll have to trouble you. Did you drive here yourself?" Xueqi smiled and said, "It's my family's car, but I was afraid of attracting attention, so I didn't park it in the school. I parked it in the parking lot next to the school. I might have to walk for a while." Li Yundong clicked his tongue and sighed. "I used to think that you were cold and arrogant, but now it seems that I was wrong. You are really good at keeping a low profile, especially compared to people like Lu Chuan." Xueqi smiled and said, "Is that a compliment? If it's a compliment, then I'll gladly accept it." The 3 of them chatted and laughed as they walked to the school gate. Before they reached the school gate, they heard students whispering around them. One of them said exaggeratedly, "Hey, did you see that? Who drove the Mercedes-Benz to the school gate?" "I don't know, but it's so cool. And it's from Scissors Gate. Hey, I'd be happy if I could sit in it once in my life." "Don't be a love-struck fool. I wonder which rich guy is using it to pick up girls." Li Yundong heard these voices and smiled at Xueqi. "It's not your car, is it?" Xueqi smiled and shook her head. "How is that possible? I don't like these kinds of ostentatious things." When they reached the school gate, they saw a very eye-catching stretch Mercedes limousine parked at the gate. The Mercedes limousine was black and translucent, giving it a dignified, and oppressive appearance. The students at the school gate rarely saw such a luxury limousine. For a moment, the gate was completely blocked. Li Yundong glanced over and saw many familiar faces in the crowd at the school gate. Xueqi, Kulu, and the others were also looking at the luxurious limousine with envious eyes. Since ancient times, Chinese people had a complex of luxury cars. Since ancient times, luxury cars had been paired with heroes. If a hero didn't have a good car, then he couldn't be called a hero. In modern times, this complex had been transferred to cars. Although Li Yundong didn't care much about material things, he was still dazzled by the limousine. He turned to look at Su Chan and saw that the girl was looking at the limousine curiously with her head tilted. "Do you like it?" Li Yundong asked in a low voice. Su Chan smiled and said, "No, I don't. It's ugly." Li Yundong thought that the girl was just comforting him. He smiled and said, "I'll work hard to earn enough money to buy it for you in the future." Although Su Chan despised such worldly things, she still felt sweet when she heard it. She smiled brightly and said, "Well, your car will be much better in the future." Li Yundong chuckled. He didn't say anything, but his eyes shone with confidence. Xueqi frowned when she saw the limousine. "Isn't that Lu Chongha's car?" Lu Chongha was Lu Chuan's father. He was a famous businessman in the city and frequented the upper-class places. Xueqi had seen his car more than once. Sure enough, when Li Yundong and the others reached the school gate, the door of the Mercedes-Benz suddenly opened. A man stepped out of the limousine. He was dressed in a high-class suit and had shiny leather shoes. It was none other than Lu Chuan. Li Yundong frowned as soon as he saw the man. "Why is this guy pestering me like a dog skin plaster?" Su Chan frowned as well. "That guy is so annoying. I'll go get him." Xueqi shook her head. "I'll do it." Lu Chuan walked up to Su Chan, bent down, and pretended to be a polite gentleman. He said, "Beautiful Miss Su Chan, may I ask you to do me a favor?" Xueqi nodded to Li Yundong and Su Chan and winked at them, signaling them not to speak. She stepped forward with a slight smile on the corner of her mouth. Her smile was full of sarcasm. "Lu Chuan, you're good. You even got your father's car out. Be careful not to scratch it, or you'll be spanked when you go back." As soon as Lu Chuan saw Xueqi, he was discouraged. He braced himself and said, "Xueqi, why do you always have to go against me?" "I always have to go against you?" Xueqi sneered. "Why don't you take a piss and look at yourself? Do you deserve it? I just want to tell you, don't be too arrogant. Keep a low profile. It's not your turn to be presumptuous on this land." "Oh? Then when did you, Miss Zhou, get to run amok on this land?" Suddenly, a voice sounded from the side. Xueqi turned her head and saw a man tilting his head and squinting at her. It was He Xiao. Xueqi frowned and said in a deep voice, "He Xiao, what are you doing here?" He Xiao walked to Xueqi's side and looked past her. He looked at Li Yundong up and down, his eyes full of disdain. "Xueqi, what does it have to do with you that I'm here? Aren't you being too nosy?" Although Xueqi kept a low profile in school, her beauty, temperament, and background had always been a hot topic among the students. Seeing such a conflict in front of them, the students watching at the school gate suddenly became excited. There was going to be a good show to watch. Xueqi looked at He Xiao coldly and said, "He Xiao, for the sake of the good relationship between our two families, I'll give you a piece of advice. If you do too much evil, you will bring about your own destruction. Leave yourself a little bit of good karma." He Xiao laughed out loud. His expression was surly, and his eyes were cold as he said, "Well said. But let me tell you, no matter how much you scold me or how much you hate me, you can't change the fact that you are my fiancé and my woman in the future." As soon as he said this, the surrounding people burst into an uproar. Li Yundong looked at Xueqi in shock, as if he couldn't believe his ears. Such a beautiful girl with outstanding temperament was actually going to marry someone like He Xiao in the future? When Xueqi heard this, her face turned red. Her red cheeks looked as if they were about to drip blood. She looked ashamed and angry. She gritted her teeth and looked at He Xiao. "He Xiao, I'm telling you, don't even think about this dream for the rest of your life. I'd rather die than marry you. He Xiao held his stomach and laughed wildly. He pointed at Li Yundong and said to Xueqi, "Then who do you want to marry?" "Him." He Xiao suddenly shouted at Li Yundong with an arrogant and surly face. "Little bastard, I'm telling you, Xueqi is my woman. If you dare to touch a hair on her, I'll kill you right away." First update. Happy reading. OM/. Chapter 97. Go to watch net. Li Yundong was suddenly humiliated. Although he was angry in his heart, his expression was indifferent. He narrowed his eyes slightly, and an extremely sharp light shot out from his eyes like a sharp arrow. Go to watch net. Xueqi saw it clearly from the side. She knew that this was a sign that Li Yundong's qi was beginning to boil and roar. Among the 5 senses of the human body, the eyes belonged to the liver, and the eyes were under the control of the liver. The liver and gallbladder relied on each other. When the liver fire was strong, the courage would also boil. Once a person was angry, the liver fire would be strong. Once the liver fire was strong, the courage would be strong, and they would dare to do things that they normally wouldn't dare to do. Therefore, the eyes of angry people would shine in all directions, be extremely sharp and murderous. At this time, Li Yundong was angry. The liver fire in his body was burning, and his courage was surging. He was also a person who had specially cultivated and trained his organs, so the liver fire and courage were as strong as raging flames. They were incredibly powerful. Once he was really angry, he would be furious and his momentum would be terrifying. As the saying goes, Guangong doesn't open his eyes, but when he does, he wants to kill. Xueqi was afraid that once Li Yundong opened his eyes, he would immediately do something shocking, so she secretly tapped the Ling Tai acupoint on Li Yundong's back. At this point, Li Yundong's qi, which had been accumulating above his head, suddenly stopped. His mind became clear, and the killing intent in his eyes was greatly reduced. Li Yundong looked at young master he coldly and said, "Oh? You want to destroy me? Tell me, how do you want to destroy me?" As he said this, his closed eyes narrowed a little more, like a dam storing a flood. Once the floodgates were opened, it would be a monstrous anger. Because Li Yundong was narrowing his eyes, young master he couldn't feel how terrifying the gaze behind Li Yundong's eyes was. He said loudly with disdain and arrogance, "Do you want me to say? Ha, that goes without saying. Who do you think you are? Who do you think you are? Let me tell you, in this world if you want to speak loudly, you must have 2 things. First, money." Young master he patted the luxury stretch limousine behind him and shouted, "Do you have money? You don't. You're just a little bastard whose parents don't want you. Am I right?" Li Yundong's whole body trembled, and his eyes were full of murderous intent. His body trembled slightly, like a volcano that was about to erupt at any time. Xueqi couldn't help but be shocked. She held Li Yundong's hand tightly and whispered, "Yundong, don't fight here. A wise man knows better than to fight when the odds are against him." The corners of Li Yundong's mouth curled into a grim smile. He snorted and didn't say anything. Seeing that he didn't say anything, He Xiao thought that he was swallowing the insult, so he became even more arrogant. He continued, "The second thing is power. Do you have power? Neither did you. Let me tell you what is power." Then, he waved at Lu Chuan. "Come here." Lu Chuan thought that He Xiao had something good to look for him, so he walked over with an apologetic smile. "Young master he, what's the matter?" Unexpectedly, young master he raised his hand and slapped him, causing him to spin on the spot. The surroundings were filled with exclamations. "Watch net. Net. Super_speed. More." New young master he had a surly look on his face as he roared loudly. His father is a celebrity entrepreneur of a private enterprise in the city, but so what? If I say I'll cut him up, I'll cut him up. If I say I'll mess with him, I'll mess with him. As he spoke, young master he pointed at Lu Chuan. "Do you have any objections?" Lu Chuan's face was purple and red. He was so ashamed that he didn't even dare to raise his head. He just nodded slightly. The girls around him, who admired his appearance and family background, immediately looked at him with disdain and spat in their hearts. Young master he snorted coldly. He said to Li Yundong arrogantly, "Do you see that? This is power." Without money, You will wait for the woman beside you to be snatched away by others. Without power, you will wait for yourself to be stepped on by others. Trash like you, hurry up and get lost, so that I don't have to deal with you. When the surrounding students saw that young master he was so arrogant and domineering, they were all secretly angry. However, Lu Chuan didn't dare to make a sound after being humiliated in public, so they didn't dare to say anything. Many of the students who admired Li Yundong looked at Li Yundong, who had been enduring in every possible way, with some disappointment. They thought to themselves, is the great hero who sacrificed his life to save others going to succumb to such power? Kulu said to Zhuang Hui with a look of disdain. Did you see that? I told you that this person only knows how to let women stand up for him. He's a coward himself. Zhuang Hui said, no, he's not that kind of person. But her face was full of disappointment. Li Yundong suddenly sneered, and a puff of air came out of his nose. It was so hot that it seemed to be burning. He took a step forward, and Su Chan and Zhou Qin, who were on both sides, whispered in surprise at the same time. Li Yundong, calm down. Li Yundong was about to speak, but he saw the crowd suddenly part, and a person came out. This man was about 50 years old. He was short, thin, and flat. He had a mouse-like beard and a wretched and strange appearance. He was wearing a gray coat and a pair of navy blue cloth shoes. He looked like an old man from the late Qing dynasty, except that he was missing a braid. This person's description was too strange, and he immediately attracted everyone's attention. He walked into the crowd, rolled his eyes, and then walked to young Master He and Lu Chuan, who were only 2 steps away from Li Yundong. He waved to them and said, little boy, go to the side. Hurry up, get out of the way. Don't let your grandfather hurt you later. Young Master He looked at the person in front of him in surprise and couldn't help laughing. Hey, where did this lunatic come from? You came here to cause trouble? Do you know who I am? How dare you call yourself my grandfather? Are you tired of living? The man tilted his head and looked at young Master He. I don't know. Young Master He laughed. You don't know who I am, yet you dare to come here and cause trouble. You are really tired of living. The man sneered and used his hand to twist the mouse-like beard on his lips. Little boy, you're young, but you're quite arrogant. Your grandfather is in Hong Kong. Even the chief executive has to be polite to me. Who do you think you are? Get out of here. You don't have any manners at all. I get angry just by looking at you. When the onlookers heard this, they immediately sucked in a breath of cold air. Even the chief executive has to be polite to him? Did this person really want to brag without paying taxes? Was he trying his best to brag? He really dared to say it. Young Master He saw that the old man was acting like an old man. He was furious in his heart and reached out to push him away. Unexpectedly, as soon as he stretched out his hand, the old man grabbed his hand. With a little force, young Master He knelt down while screaming. Go to watch net. 7K. Oath M. Colorful * rainbow * literature under learning % super # speed. The old man patted young Master He's cheek with his other hand and sneered. Little boy, you have no manners. I'll discipline you on behalf of your parents. After saying that, he let go and waved at him. Get out of here, get out of here. Don't get in my way. Young Master He endured the pain and humiliation and said fiercely. Okay, if you dare to touch me you're dead. The old man frowned. Cut the crap. Get out of here. If you have the ability, call your parents over. After saying that, he rolled up his sleeves. He waved his sleeves, and with a whoosh, a black shadow covered the sky, sweeping up young Master He until he disappeared. When his sleeves flashed again, young Master He had already been sent flying. The students who were close to him only felt a strong wind blowing on their faces, making them unable to open their eyes. Wow, what kind of kung fu is this? At this time, everyone knew that this old man was not an ordinary person, especially when he used the kung fu of his sleeves. They were even more stirred up, and their hearts became more and more excited. This show was getting more and more interesting. The old man threw young Master He away and snorted coldly. Kids nowadays are really uneducated. I don't know how the adults in Taoism taught them. He said in a low voice, then tidied up his clothes and looked Li Yundong up and down. Are you Li Yundong? Li Yundong said warily, I am. The old man cupped his hands to Li Yundong and said in a clear voice, "Buddha has hair in the mountains. Sorry for offending you." When Li Yundong saw the old man teach young Master He a lesson, he immediately felt angry. At this time, when he saw that the old man was polite, he had a good impression of him. However, when he suddenly heard the old man say, "I'm sorry," he was stunned. Then, Lin Youfa suddenly took a step forward and threw a punch like a cannon at Li Yundong's face. Su Chan was quick to react and pulled Zhou Qin away. Although Li Yundong didn't know why the old man wanted to fight with him, the anger in his heart had not dissipated. Seeing that someone was making a move, he was not afraid but happy. He raised his eyebrows, opened his eyes and shouted, "Good!" Li Yundong could be said to have reached a higher level in qi cultivation. His 5 senses were even sharper than those of warriors who had practiced martial arts for a lifetime. He raised his palm and caught the other party's fist with a snap. Seeing that his fist had been caught, Lin Youfa immediately punched Li Yundong's heart with his other fist like a poisonous snake. At the same time, he kicked Li Yundong's calf. On the surface, this move seemed to be aimed at Li Yundong's heart, but in fact, the killer move was the shadowless kick under his feet. Although the shadowless kick was famous for Huang Fei Hong, in fact, the shadowless kick was not as fancy and flashy as it was in the movies. Huang Fei Hong had learned the shadowless kick under Song Hui's tutelage, and with this move, he had made a great reputation in Foshan and won the title of a grandmaster. Many people who had fought with him had often suffered a great loss under his shadowless kick, so most of the sects in Foshan had also practiced the shadowless kick kung fu. Lin Youfa's kick was not only hidden and insidious, but also aimed at the east and the west. If it had been someone else, their calf would have been immediately broken. But at this time, Li Yundong had cultivated to the foresight realm of spirit concentration. If someone with a lower cultivation than him wanted to do something, his divine sense could immediately sense it. Therefore, the moment Lin Youfa kicked, Li Yundong also kicked. The two of them seemed to have discussed it beforehand. Their calves hit each other, and their bodies shook at the same time. Seeing that his shadowless kick had been blocked, Lin Youfa immediately punched and kicked again. But this time, his feet were fake, and his fists were real. It was extremely difficult to figure out what was real and what was fake. However, Li Yundong seemed to see through all his attacks and blocked them all. The two men's fists and feet collided, making a series of muffled bangs, which made people's hair stand on end. Their movements were fast and fierce, and the bystanders could not react at all. In the blink of an eye, the two of them had exchanged several blows. Lin Youfa practiced Hong Quan, which paid attention to big movements. His attacks were strong and powerful, fast and powerful. But at this time his arm was caught, and he was in a hurry to break free. His shadowless kick had repeatedly failed. He suddenly shouted, and with his other hand, he grabbed Li Yundong's hand that was grabbing his fist, and used his 5 fingers to grab his thumb. This move was a ruthless move in the grappling technique. As long as you grabbed a person's thumb and pulled hard, even an Iron Man would fall to the ground. As soon as Li Yundong's thumb was caught, an ominous thought flashed through his mind like lightning. Not good. Li Yundong immediately exerted force from his waist, loosened his fingers, and abruptly pulled his thumb back, breaking free from Lin Youfa's grasp. His arm suddenly expanded, and he climbed up Lin Youfa's forearm like a python coiling around a tree. Although Li Yundong hadn't practiced kung fu for many days, he had accumulated a certain amount of actual combat experience by fighting a lot of people over the past few days. Especially after the confrontation with firearms, the tempering at the moment of life and death had made him understand the most important thing in actual combat. Therefore, in the fight before him, he could rely on his intuition to fight against a martial arts master like Lin Youfa, who had been practicing for a lifetime. Lin Youfa saw Li Yundong reach out to grab his forearm. As soon as his fingers touched his skin, Lin Youfa immediately got goosebumps. It was as if his whole arm had been sent into the mouth of a crocodile. As long as Li Yundong exerted force, his bones and tendons would be broken. Lin Youfa's heart trembled. He let out a fierce shout and quickly retreated. Li Yundong tore off the sleeve of Lin Youfa's coat, revealing a skinny arm. Li Yundong's attack missed, but he did not stop. He took a step forward, twisted his waist, twisted his body, and threw a punch straight at Lin Youfa's face. Lin Youfa was shocked to hear the sound of the punch tearing through the air. He blocked the punch with his palms in front of his face. Then, with a light tap of his feet, his body flew backward like a rock, crashing into the limousine behind him with a loud bang. Lu Chuan, who had been stunned for a moment, suddenly snapped out of his daze. "Hey! Watch out for my car!" He only felt that the blood in his body was boiling, as if there was an aura that had nowhere to vent. He gritted his teeth, twisted his body, and hit his right fist behind his back. He paused for a moment, then suddenly twisted his waist. All the aura in his body burst out like a flood, instantly gathering on his fist. With a loud bang, he punched the air. In that instant, Li Yundong's hair and beard stood on end. White steam rose from the top of his head. The punch compressed the air, creating a shockwave visible to the naked eye. Lin Youfa's pupils shrank instantly. He cried out in shock, "Fist energy?" With a leap, his body flew up like a feather, dodging this terrifying punch. Although Lin Youfa had dodged Li Yundong's punch, the car behind Lin Youfa couldn't. Everyone heard a loud bang, and a dent appeared on the door of the extended Mercedes-Benz. The body of the extended Mercedes-Benz was forced to move half a meter horizontally with a squeak, and the tires left a black tire mark on the ground. At this moment, the scene suddenly quieted down. The students who were watching at the school gate looked at Li Yundong, who was like a god, with their mouths agape. They were so shocked that they couldn't control themselves. They suddenly realized that in this world, there seemed to be something that was above money and power, and there was a kind of person who was above all living beings. Happy reading. OM/. Chapter 98. Go to Watch Network. After Li Yundong punched out, he immediately felt refreshed all over his body, and the stuffiness in his chest was released. He saw Lin Youfa standing in the distance and staring at the fist mark on the car with wide eyes, so he didn't chase after him anymore. Go to Kanban. 7K. Oath M. Net. Super_speed. More. New. Lin Youfa stared for a long time, then suddenly raised his head and laughed. Good. I didn't expect that there would be such a good cultivator in the mainland. Lin Youfa tore off the tattered gown on his body, revealing his ribs. He took a deep breath, pressed his hands on his chest, and patted it hard, making a ha-hop sound. Then he took out a talisman from nowhere. After the talisman quickly burned into ashes in his hand, he swallowed it into his mouth and muttered, "Mao Shan Tru beating divine kung fu, the 8 martials show their magic power. Urgent as the law, the great demon-subduing emperor of the 3 realms is far away from Tianzuan. Holy Emperor Guan, please come to me." The surrounding people saw that he looked like he was performing a ritual. Just as they were dumbfounded, they suddenly heard a series of cracking sounds coming from Lin Youfa's bony body. The muscles on his body quickly swelled up, and in an instant, he turned into a muscular and mighty man in the prime of his life. Lin Youfa seemed to have become 20 years younger in an instant. His eyes were wide open like a leopard's. He cupped his hands to Li Yundong in an imposing manner and said, "Let me introduce myself again. I'm Lin Youfa of the Immortal Fist sect under Jiolong Huang Daxian. Zhanren Li, please enlighten me." Huang Daxian? God-beating? Su Chan suddenly exclaimed in a low voice. Zhou Qin, who was standing to one side, was shocked by the inhuman power displayed by Li Yundong and Lin Youfa's terrifying changes. When she heard Su Chan's words, she immediately asked, "What Huang Daxian? What God-beating?" Su Chan said to Zhou Qin nervously, "It's a relatively popular cultivation school in Guangdong and Hong Kong. It used to originate from the boxers in the north. Later, after being suppressed, it spread to Guangdong and Hong Kong." Su Chan shouted to Li Yundong, "Yundong, this is the God-beating skill. Go, don't fight with him." When Li Yundong heard this, before he could answer, he saw Lin Youfa suddenly strike out with his palm. Li Yundong suddenly felt a suffocation in his chest. It was as if there was a powerful man standing in front of him, holding a green dragon crescent moon blade and slashing at him. A sense of extreme danger suddenly flashed through Li Yundong's heart, and he immediately crossed his fists. Bang! With a muffled sound, Li Yundong's whole body shook. Even though he had the Jindan's qi to protect his body, he still felt a sharp pain in his wrist, as if he had lost consciousness in an instant. Watch net. Who the hell is this old man? Li Yundong was shocked. At this time, Lin Youfa's muscles and bones had more than doubled in size. He had transformed from a short skinny old man of about 1.5 meters into a strong muscular man of about 1.8 meters. His upper body was bare, and every muscle on his body looked like it was about to explode. His eyes shone brightly, and his gaze was so sharp that one could not look at him directly. Anyone who looked at him for too long would feel a piercing pain in their eyes. When Lin Youfa saw that Li Yundong had withstood his knife, he laughed and said, "Good. There are only a handful of people in the younger generation who can take my attack with their bare hands. No wonder my disciple, Huang Yifei, is no match for you." Li Yundong was shocked. "Are you Huang Yifei's master?" Lin Youfa cupped his hands and said, "My disciple is stupid and stubborn. Zhenren Li, may I know which sect you are from and who your master is?" Lin Youfa saw that Li Yundong's aura was majestic and powerful, and he was so young, so he subconsciously regarded him as a descendant of a famous sect. Only the inner disciples of the big sects could have such achievements at such a young age after being soaked in all kinds of medicinal herbs since childhood. Li Yundong's mind was chaotic and shocked. He said in surprise, "What sect? I don't have a master, nor do I have a sect." Lin Youfa thought that Li Yundong was unwilling to say, so he snorted coldly and said, "Well, it seems that I can only test you myself. Zhenren Li, please don't hold back." As he said this, he cupped his hands and opened his eyes. A threatening divine light shot out from his eyes, blazing like flames. Lin Youfa's loud shout made the people around him feel suffocated and short of breath. They covered their ears in pain. Li Yundong was also shaken by this loud shout. The blood qi in his chest churned, and it was difficult for him to gather his qi. Lin Youfa stamped his feet and rushed toward Li Yundong like a cannonball. Due to the transformation of Renyuan Jindan, Li Yundong's aura was stronger and more vigorous than Lin Youfa's, but after all, he lacked cultivation. He could barely handle a hand-to-hand fight, but once he encountered such a tyrannical cultivator, he didn't know how to deal with it. Seeing this, Su Chan immediately flew to Li Yundong's side and grabbed him. With a leap, the two of them flew over Lin Youfa's head and landed on the other side of the Mercedes-Benz. Lin Youfa missed. His feet stopped, and his body immediately flew backward. He shrunk his head, lowered his shoulders, hunched his back, and bent his knees. Like a tortoise with its head in its shell, he slammed his hard back into the Mercedes-Benz. Go to C. Net. Super_speed. More. New. As soon as Li Yundong and Su Chan landed on the ground, they saw the Mercedes-Benz next to them. The two of them slammed their palms on the Mercedes-Benz at the same time, stopping the Mercedes-Benz with a loud bang. Lu Chuan, who was watching from the sidelines, wanted to cry but had no tears. "My Mercedes-Benz," he yelled at the top of his lungs. After Li Yundong and Su Chan blocked Lin Youfa's attack, he saw the Mercedes-Benz blocking his way. He kicked the front of the Mercedes-Benz into the air. Then, he slammed his hand on the bottom of the Mercedes-Benz and sent it flying. Li Yundong was shocked and his eyes widened in a daze. Su Chan grabbed him and whispered, "Let's go. Don't fight here." Then, she pulled Li Yundong away from the school gate, where the crowd of onlookers was growing. "Where do you think you're going?" Lin Youfa snorted. Just as he was about to reach the crowd of onlookers, Lin Youfa leaped 2 meters into the air and leaped over the wall of people. The students at the school gate were all dumbfounded. If it wasn't for Lu Chuan's luxurious Mercedes-Benz that was flipped upside down on the ground with its wheels spinning, they would have thought that they were dreaming. Zhou Qin watched Li Yundong and Su Chan's departing backs in shock. Her heart was pounding like crazy. They really aren't ordinary people. Ku Lu, who had criticized Li Yundong earlier, couldn't help but gape. I'm not dreaming, am I?" Zhuang Hui stammered. I don't know," Ku Lu said, stuttering. "How could something like that even exist in this world?" Lu Chuan knelt on the ground with a blank look on his face. "My Mercedes-Benz." He Xiao was the only one who looked at Li Yundong and Su Chan with a mixture of shock and fear in his eyes. Li Yundong ran with Su Chan as fast as he could. Who the hell is that guy? How could he be so powerful? He kicked a Mercedes-Benz over? Is he even a human? People were always stricter than others and more lenient than themselves. Li Yundong was no exception. He had punched the car in the air and moved it half a meter away, but he didn't feel like a non-human. Lin Youfa had kicked the car away, and he suddenly felt that it was unacceptable. Su Chan gritted her teeth. Her eyes flickered, as if she was debating whether or not to tell Li Yundong. Li Yundong couldn't help but say angrily, "How long are you going to hide it from me? Who the hell are you? Who the hell is he?" Su Chan gritted her teeth and said, "He's a cultivator, just like me. But he's from the Immortal Fist School. He used the God Strike just now." Li Yundong and Su Chan were as agile as a young man and a woman doing parkour on the street. They attracted the attention of passers-by. "What's the God Strike?" Li Yundong shouted as he ran. Su Chan did a somersault and leaped over a car. "It's asking a god to possess you. Asking a god to possess you." Li Yundong wanted to laugh, but he didn't dare. That explanation was ridiculous, but he couldn't explain what he had seen with his own eyes. "What do you mean by asking a god to possess you? What god did he invite? What kind of god can turn him from a shriveled old man to a mighty man?" Su Chan said, "The demon-subduing great emperor of the three realms is far more powerful than the holy emperor Guan." Li Yundong was confused by the series of names. "What? Can't you put it simply?" Su Chan shouted, "Guan Yu the warrior sage." Li Yundong immediately cursed, "Damn it! Do you want to scare me to death? Can't you invite a smaller god?" Just as Su Chan was about to speak, she heard a loud noise and curses coming from behind her. She turned her head and saw Lin Youfa chasing after her. Along the way, he ran amok, throwing people and horses into a mess, and cursing. She immediately pointed to the park not far away and said, "Run there and find a place with fewer people." It was in the afternoon, and a group of old men and women were singing in the pavilion with musical instruments. They were singing a part of Susan's Solution. The old man playing the eru finished playing, and an old lady sang the line. Susan left Hongdong County and came to the main street. Just as she was about to swing her sleeves, two figures suddenly dashed past her. They were so fast that the music on the old man's shelf was sent flying in the air. Before the group of old men and women could come to their senses, another figure ran over like a train as soon as the music in the air fell to the ground, and the music on the ground was broken into pieces by his feet. The old men and women were like a group of stone sculptures, staring at the three figures in a daze. For a moment, the pavilion was in a mess, and it was very sad. Li Yundong turned his head and looked at Lin Youfa, who was getting closer and closer. He couldn't help asking Su Chan, "Where are you going?" "There are people everywhere." Su Chan pointed to a small forest not far away and said, "Over there." The two of them quickly rushed into the lychee forest. Seeing that there was no one around, Su Chan stopped and quickly took out a golden hairpin from her arms. She pointed it at Lin Youfa and said, "Take it." With a swoosh, the golden hairpin suddenly turned into a golden lightning, and in the blink of an eye, it was aimed at Lin Youfa's eyes. Lin Youfa was shocked and angry. He clapped his hands and the golden hairpin landed in his palms. He said angrily in a deep voice, "What a vicious woman." Su Chan didn't want to argue with him. She just wanted to take down this cultivator of the Immortal Fist sect as soon as possible. The little girl's figure quickly turned into a light smoke, and her figure was so fast that Li Yundong could barely keep up with her naked eyes. Li Yundong saw that Su Chan seemed to have turned into several people at once, surrounding Lin Youfa in a circle. It was almost impossible to tell which was the afterimage and which was the real body. Su Chan's palm strikes, finger pokes, and flying feet were all aimed at Lin Youfa's vital parts. For a moment, Lin Youfa could only fight back and roar again and again. Lin Youfa roared in shock and anger. "Where did you come from?" "Li Yundong, if you have the ability, come and fight with me." While he was roaring, he suddenly felt a sharp pain on the back of his neck. Lin Youfa roared, turned around and punched, immediately shattering one of Su Chan's afterimages. He touched the back of his neck with his hand, only to feel a black hair stuck in the Tianju acupoint on the back of his neck. Lin Youfa was shocked. "This witch is so powerful. She can poke my Tianju acupoint, so she can also poke my death acupoint. I'm afraid I'm no match for her." Lin Youfa made up his mind. He immediately stamped his feet and shouted, "Good witch! I will remember this favor." As he said this, he turned around and ran away. Su Chan saw that Lin Youfa had left, but she didn't chase after him. Her figure stopped, and the afterimages around her instantly merged into one. Su Chan glanced at Lin Youfa's figure with disdain and spat secretly. She was about to proudly ask for a reward from Li Yundong, But when she turned her head, she saw that Li Yundong was looking at her with an inexplicable gaze, as if he was looking at a stranger. Su Chan's heart suddenly trembled. She lowered her head and walked step by step to Li Yundong. She grabbed the corner of her clothes with her hand and didn't say anything. Li Yundong was silent for a long time, then slowly sighed. Su-chan, who are you? Happy reading. OM/. Chapter 99. Go to Watch Network. Su-chan knew that she couldn't hide this time. She looked at Li Yundong pitifully and said weakly, "I'll tell you when we get back, okay?" Li Yundong looked at Su-chan helplessly. "Alas, I'm going to be on the headlines of the TV news tomorrow." The two of them walked out of the park with different thoughts in their minds. Fortunately, there were not many people in the park at this time, so they were not stopped by the people who heard the noise and came to watch the fun. OM/Li Yundong stopped a taxi. After the two of them took a taxi back to their home, Li Yundong deliberately put on a straight face, coughed dryly, and said, "Be honest. Be honest and lenient." Su-chan lowered her head and tugged at the corner of her clothes. Her pitiful appearance made it impossible for anyone to associate her with the nimble, graceful, and ghostly figure of a master from before. Su-chan and Li Yundong sat on the sofa and began to talk about how she had obtained the Renyuan Jindan, how she had been hunted, and how she had met Li Yundong. She told him everything clearly, except that she was a vixen. She told him everything clearly. Fox Zen School had been founded in the early days of Emperor Xianzong of the Tang dynasty. Although it was not a famous and decent sect, it was still a small sect with a good reputation. But at the end of the Tang dynasty, after the death of the third-generation sect master, mystical Silver Fox succeeded as the fourth-generation sect master, and Fox Zen School had a great demon that was rarely seen in 1,000 years. After mystical Silver Fox succeeded as the sect master of Fox Zen School, she alone provoked the northern and southern Taoist sects to turn against each other. The Buddhist and Taoist sects launched a bloody vendetta, and even indirectly led to the destruction of the late Tang dynasty. Although her strength was strong for a while and she had reached the highest realm of the Fox Zen School of the nine-tailed celestial fox, her actions were too exaggerated, which aroused the anger of people and gods in the cultivation world. Not only was she hunted down, but the whole Fox Zen School was reduced to an evil sect that everyone hated. Su-chan felt wronged when she thought of the past. Over the past thousands of years, there have been thousands of tigers, leopards, jackals, bears, deer, snakes, and pigs. Why are we foxes the only ones who have been scolded? Of course, there was the credit of Daji, Meishi, Bao Si, and the others. But more importantly, the mystical Silver Fox had offended the whole cultivation world alone, which caused all the cultivators to discredit the Fox Zen School at any time and place. They scolded, "Wild Fox Zen." She was afraid that once he found out that she was a vixen, he would gnash his teeth in hatred and kill her like everyone else. After listening to Su-chan's explanation, Li Yundong was stunned on the spot. All the things that he hadn't been able to figure out in the past were now clear to him. But there was one thing that he couldn't figure out. He couldn't help asking in a daze, "Are there really immortals in this world?" Seeing that he didn't ask about her sect, Su-chan immediately breathed a sigh of relief in her heart. She blinked her eyes and said, "There are so many things in the world that there are so many immortals in the world that they are as rich as bamboo." Watch Net. 7K. Oath M. The path of immortality is the path of nothingness. Even though Li Yundong was a student of the Chinese language department, he had skipped all of his classes in the university. Hearing this sentence, Li Yundong's eyes went wide. "What did you say?" Su-chan said, "You know Guhong, right?" Li Yundong nodded. "Yes." Su-chan blinked her eyes. "You know that Guhong himself is an immortal of cultivation, right?" Li Yundong didn't know whether to laugh or cry. "Guhong is an immortal? This is the first time I've heard of such a thing." Su-chan explained. "Oh, do you know who Guhong's master is?" Li Yundong smiled. "I know that. It's Zheng Yin." Su-chan asked again, "What about Zheng Yin before?" "That's not a problem for me. It's Gu Xian, the immortal of Tai Chi." Li Yundong smiled proudly. Su-chan asked again, "You also know that Gu Xian is called the immortal of Tai Chi, so Gu Xian himself is an immortal of cultivation. Then let me ask you again. Do you know who Gu Xian's master is?" Li Yundong was stunned. "I don't know." Su-chan said, It's the founder of the Danding sect, Xueqi. Xueqi. This name was well known to Li Yundong. He had been a fan of the Three Kingdoms since he was a child, so he was naturally familiar with the name Xueqi. When Xueqi appeared in the records of the Three Kingdoms and the Romance of the Three Kingdoms, she appeared as an immortal. Hearing Su Chan's words, Li Yundong's heart suddenly shook, and he was secretly shocked. Could it be that the ancient records are true? Is Xueqi really an immortal? Su Chan saw that Li Yundong was silent and shocked, so she struck while the iron was hot and said, Xueqi founded the Danding sect and taught it to Guxian. The immortal of Tai Chi Guxian then taught it to Zhang Yin, and Zhang Yin then taught it to Guhong. The Danding sect was carried forward in Guhong's hands, and the Taoist Danding sect became famous all over the world. Guhong also wrote an immortal cultivation masterpiece, Embracing Simplicity, which has been regarded as a classic by cultivators for thousands of years. Su Chan said, what I just said is from Guhong's Embracing Simplicity, which means that there are all kinds of wonders in this world, let alone immortals. People's knowledge and experience are limited, so how can they use limited knowledge and experience to speculate about the infinite world? Li Yundong listened in a daze, a strange expression on his face. That works. It can't be, can it? Isn't this the devil's logic? Su Chan explained to Li Yundong patiently. Guhong pointed out at the beginning of the Embracing Simplicity. Immortals have no seeds, and mortals can cultivate to become immortals. Moreover, Guhong said, immortals can be learned as millet can be sown, and it is very bright. Go to see the net. Net. Super_speed. Even more. There is no such thing as not plowing and obtaining good crops, and no such thing as not working hard to obtain longevity. Su Chan shook her head and recited the cultivation classics that her master had forced her to memorize in the past. Man cultivates nature, and does not understand people. Therefore, those who understand the shallowness can use all things, and those who understand the depth can live a long life. As for Elder Peng, he is still human, not a different kind, but an elder who lives alone. Because he has obtained the Tao, it is not natural. Trees cannot imitate pines and cypresses, and insects cannot imitate turtles and cranes, so they are short. People have wisdom, and if they can cultivate Elder Peng's Tao, they can achieve the same results. It means that man is the spirit of all things, and man understands the rules and philosophy of the operation of all things in the world, so man can learn Taoist magic and achieve the goal of immortality. Even Peng Zhu and Laozi are not non-humans with long lifespans. They also live a long life because they understand Taoist magic, and it is not predestined. Su Chan saw that Li Yundong's eyes were fixed on her long speech, and it was obvious that he was a little lost in thought. She was a little mad, pulled her hair, and said, oh, to sum it up, becoming an immortal is not natural, not predestined. Man is the spirit of all things, and he has the subjective initiative to learn. As long as he firmly believes in the existence of immortals, and works hard to cultivate the Tao, and with the guidance of a wise master, he will definitely be able to live a long life and become an immortal. If it is so easy to understand, why can't you understand it? I'm so angry. Li Yundong's expression was strange. He waved his hand and said, wait a minute, let me digest it. I'm a little confused. Su Chan pouted and said unhappily, what's there to be confused about? You think what I said is false, but the Ren Yuan Jin Dan in your body can't be fake, can it? Li Yundong's body shook, and the look of doubt on his face gradually disappeared. He thought to himself, yes, my superhuman strength can't be fake, can it? There are really immortals in this world? There are really immortals in this world. Yes, there are many things that human beings can't explain. Why are they so sure that there must be no such things as supernatural powers and gods in this world? Confucius also said, outside the body, there is no such thing as existence. It was obvious that Confucius also believed that there were such things as demons and immortals in the world. Many people in Western countries still believe in the existence of God and heaven, and their beliefs and cognition will not be shaken by the development of technology. But why does our country deny all of this in modern times? Li Yundong's eyes became brighter and brighter. He felt as if a door was opening toward him with a squeak. Behind the door was a world that he had never seen or heard of before. Li Yundong turned his head to look at Su Chan. His eyes were bright, and he carefully looked her up and down. Su Chan was at a loss, and she muttered in her heart, he won't see through my background, will he? Su Chan's heart was beating like a drum. She turned her head to the side, not daring to look into Li Yundong's eyes. Li Yundong had no idea what she was thinking. When Su-chan turned her head to the side, he saw that her face was so beautiful that it made his heart beat faster. He couldn't help but laugh. "So you're a god too?" When Su-chan heard this, she immediately breathed a sigh of relief. The only worry in her heart had also been relieved. She deliberately pretended to be cute, pointed 2 fingers at her cheeks, and said with a smile, "I am a Xiaoyao Xiaoxian." Li Yundong burst into laughter and waved at her. "Even if you're a god, you're still my girl." Su-chan giggled and crawled over to Li Yundong. She nudged Li Yundong's chin with her head and said coquettishly, "You're not mad at me, are you?" "Why would I be mad at you?" Li Yundong asked. Su-chan thought to herself, "I wanted to squeeze you dry back then." But she wouldn't dare say that out loud. Su-chan rolled her eyes and giggled. "I've been hiding these things from you for a long time." Li Yundong pretended to be angry. "If this hadn't happened today, how long would you have hidden it from me? You deserve to be spanked." As he said that, he slapped the little lass's perky and round buttocks twice. Su-chan wriggled. "Don't hit me," she said. "I'll be a good girl." "I'm telling you," Li Yundong said with a straight face. "Don't do this again. I don't hide anything from you." Su-chan blinked her eyes. "Oh." But after a while, she seemed to remember something. She looked at Li Yundong and asked weakly, "What if there's something I'm hiding from you?" Li Yundong found the girl's pitiful appearance funny and distressed. He deliberately scared the girl. "If you keep doing this, I won't want you anymore." Su-chan's face turned pale. "Ha!" Seeing her panic, Li Yundong immediately became suspicious. "What else are you hiding from me?" he asked. Su-chan immediately smiled apologetically. "Nothing else." Li Yundong looked incredulous. "Really?" Su-chan threw herself into Li Yundong's arms and said coquettishly, "Nothing else, my good lord. I was just teasing you." Li Yundong smiled and reached out to kiss her. "Wow, how dare you tease me? Girl, I think you're tired of living." Su-chan was born with a sensitive body. She trembled and begged for mercy. Her voice was trembling. "No, no, no. I really don't want it anymore. I can't take it anymore." Li Yundong pinched the girl's nose. "Do you still dare to do it?" Su-chan laughed so hard that tears were flowing out of her eyes. "No, I won't do it again," she begged. Li Yundong saw Su-chan's messy hair and her fragrant breath. His heart suddenly warmed up. He lowered his head and was about to kiss her, but suddenly there was a knock on the door. Li Yundong was furious. "Who is it this time?" Su-chan turned over and sat up. She looked at the door nervously and said in a low voice, "It can't be that Lin Youfa, can it?" Li Yundong laughed and said, "How dare he chase me here? Doesn't he know that my girl is fierce and powerful? I'll close the door and let her go." Su-chan nodded with a smile, but soon realized that something was wrong. She said angrily, "You're scolding me again." Li Yundong laughed and stood up. "I don't care who he is. We, the twin killers of the dark winds, will kill anyone who stands in our way." Happy reading. OM/. Chapter 100. Go to Watch Network. To Li Yundong's surprise, it was Xueqi who knocked on the door. Watch Net. When Li Yundong opened the door, he was obviously stunned. Xueqi tilted her head and looked at him with a smile. "Is it strange?" Li Yundong smiled and said, "It's not strange. You are the only one who knows where I live. Come in. Are you here to inform me that you are going to be on TV or in court?" Xueqi smiled and said, "You are still glib at this time. You forgot to take your school bag. I brought it for you." As she spoke, she took out a black school bag from behind her. Li Yundong patted his head and said, "Oh, thank you so much. Please come in." Xueqi stood at the door but didn't go in. She said, "No, I still have something to do." Li Yundong said with some embarrassment, "So busy? Don't you want to sit down?" Xueqi shook her head and said, "I really have something to do." Li Yundong watched Xueqi turn around and leave. He suddenly shouted, "Xueqi!" Xueqi stopped and turned around. "What's the matter?" Li Yundong thought for a while and said, "Aren't you curious about what happened today?" Xueqi smiled slightly. You will tell me if you want to. After that, she waved her hand and said to Li Yundong, I'm leaving. By the way, don't worry. No one will cause you trouble. Li Yundong knew Xueqi's character. If she didn't say anything, it would be fine. But once she did, it would be equivalent to taking all the responsibility for today's events. He smiled gratefully and said, I've troubled you again. Xueqi smiled and said, Don't say such things between friends. By the way, why is your cell phone always turned off? Only then did Li Yundong remember that he still had a cell phone on him. He smiled bitterly and said, Can I not turn it off? Last time I gave out my phone number, as soon as I turned it on, I was immediately bombarded with calls. Xueqi covered her mouth and laughed. It seems that you need to change your phone number. After that, she smiled sweetly, waved her hand, and walked into the elevator. Li Yundong watched Xueqi leave, then closed the door and spread his hands to Xueqi. He sighed and said, I owe her another favor. Oh, it's the hardest to bear a beauty's kindness. Xueqi stared at him with wide eyes. Are you going to abandon me just because you want her? Li Yundong chuckled and hugged the little girl. He tapped her nose and said, Why are you so worried about me all day long? Am I that kind of person? 3,000 waters. I will only take 1 scoop to drink. With a little girl like you by my side, I can deal with it. By the way, don't you always push me to her side? Why aren't you pushing any more today? Xueqi was a child, so her worries came and went quickly. Her eyes turned into crescent moons again, and she put her arms around his waist and said with a smile, You belong to me alone. I don't care. Don't even think about snatching it. Li Yundong patted the little girl's head lovingly. Yes, yes, I'm yours alone. As he said this, he suddenly thought of something. He chuckled and said, By the way, do you want a film? Xueqi saw that Li Yundong's smile was very suggestive. She giggled and said, No, I don't want to see it. Your smile is so bad. It's definitely not a good thing. Li Yundong's face darkened. Nonsense, he said. Feng Na is a famous member of our university's student council. Why would she watch something like that? Li Yundong reached into his school bag and rummaged through it for a bit. He pulled out the disc that he had taken from Feng Na this morning. Hee, do you want it? Xueqi shook her head vigorously and giggled. She tried to run away, but Li Yundong grabbed her. Go watch it. 7K. Li Yundong held the little girl with one hand and put the disc into the DVD player with the other. He chuckled. Stop struggling, girl. Just give in to me. Xueqi giggled and covered her eyes with her hands. I don't want to see it, she said loudly. I don't want to see it. You're so bad. Li Yundong saw that even though Xueqi had covered her eyes with her hands, her fingers were wide open. Nothing was blocked. He laughed and put his arm around Xueqi's waist, ready to watch the film. But as soon as the film started playing, Li Yundong was disappointed. Big Mouth Guafarong. Days of Living with a Stewardess. Holy shit. Why are these two girls so secretive about this kind of film? Are they kidding me? Li Yundong was furious. He had thought that the film was a romantic action film, so he had pulled a tooth out of the tiger's mouth. Who would have thought that it was a serious soap opera? Alas, I miscalculated. Li Yundong said with a sigh. Li Yundong saw Xueqi giggling behind him. He turned his head and laughed. Why are you still covering your eyes, he said. Can't you open your fingers a little wider? Hey, by the way, I still have a copy of Days of Living with a Stewardess in my room. Do you want to watch it? Xueqi giggled at Li Yundong's naughty smile. No way, she said. Li Yundong's interest waned. Forget it then. You watch it yourself. I'm going to surf the internet. Go watch it. 7K. Oath M. Rainbow carrot asterisk literature underschool and super hashtag fast. Update. Xueqi loved watching soap operas. She put down her hands and hugged Li Yundong. You can't go. Watch it with me. Li Yundong begged for mercy. My little lady, please let me go. You might as well kill me if you want me to watch this kind of soap opera. Xueqi pursed her lips unhappily. Li Yundong pinched her cheeks. Okay, let go. I'll go make you dinner. Are you okay now? Only then did Su Chan let go of his hand and nodded obediently. After dinner, Li Yundong surfed the internet in his room for a while. When he logged into the forum anonymously, he found that the school forum was in chaos again. The most popular post was about the incident that happened at the school gate after school today. Li Yundong clicked on it curiously and found that the person who had written the post had described the whole process vividly. However, because the description was so vivid, many people who hadn't seen the scene expressed serious doubts. How could something like this happen in this world? This was the most common question among the skeptics. Although there were a lot of people who saw this at the school gate, there were even more people who didn't see it. There was a very interesting characteristic of humans. When they heard things that they couldn't understand, they would always try to deny the existence of such things. What made Li Yundong the most was that there was a cell phone video attached to the post. It's over. This is going to be fun. Li Yundong clicked on the post speechlessly. He found that the quality of the cell phone video was not only poor, but also very shaky. Just watching it for a few seconds was unbearable. The post was filled with curses and ridicule. This video is so unprofessional. What the hell is this video about? It's not good enough. My eyes are going to blur. Holy shit. The original poster didn't even inherit a single bit of Brother Guanxi's skills. Hong Kong Guanxi Professional Photography is sincerely recruiting students from the mainland. Contact number 138432352. Contact person Age Yao. Li Yundong burst into laughter as he read all the comments. His heart was finally at ease. He turned off his computer and walked out of his bedroom. To his surprise, Su Chan was still watching a soap opera. Li Yundong didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Hey, are you addicted? I want to practice qi. Can't you move aside? Can't you see the time? Li Yundong had already developed the habit of practicing qi. Now that he knew that he was practicing immortal arts that could help him become an immortal, he became even more motivated and diligent. Su Chan turned her head and pouted. But I'm not done. Li Yundong took out the disc and handed it to Su Chan. Then, he pushed her into his room. I have a TV and a DVD in my room. You can watch it yourself. Can you do it? Su Chan's anger turned to joy. Humph. Of course I can. Hey, don't break the disc. I borrowed it from Feng Na. Li Yundong said. Su Chan made a face at him. Okay. Li Yundong smiled and shook his head. He sat cross-legged in the living room, facing the east. His thumbs and ring fingers were intertwined, palms facing up, and his hands rested on his thighs. Slowly, he entered a deep meditative state. Su Chan watched the soap opera in her bedroom. She watched it all the way until dawn the next day. Then, with a start, she realized that she had just watched a show called Understanding. She was mesmerized by the playful and ordinary love story between the male and female leads, especially the cohabitation between the male and female leads. Su Chan couldn't help but think of herself and Li Yundong. Su Chan took the disc out of the machine and tossed it on the bed. Then, she collapsed onto Li Yundong's bed. She was conflicted. On the one hand, she was worried that Ruan Hongling would continue to keep an eye on her and Li Yundong. On the other hand, she was worried that Lin Youfa would come looking for trouble in the future. But she couldn't bear to move out of this place. Besides, cultivators had never heard of the saying that they would move out the moment their enemies came looking for them. It wasn't easy to find a good cultivation abode. Cultivators would never give it up unless they had no other choice. Of course, the thing that bothered her the most was her identity. What would happen if Li Yundong found out? Would Li Yundong really abandon me? I don't think so, right? Su Chan's heart was pounding. But when she thought about how serious Li Yundong was, she couldn't help but feel uneasy. The more Su Chan thought about it, the more she tossed and turned on the bed. After a while, she suddenly heard a crack. Su Chan froze. She sat up and looked under her elbow. The disc had broken into 2 pieces. Su Chan sat up on the bed and stared blankly at the disc. This thing isn't that brittle, is it? She stammered. She put the disc together and tried to piece it back together. As soon as she did, she realized that the disc was intact. Then, she loosened her grip and the disc fell to the ground. Su Chan stood up with a sad face. What should I do? Yundong specifically told me not to break the disc. I'm doomed now. I'm going to get spanked. Coincidentally, Li Yundong had just woken up from his meditation. Su-chan, have you woken up yet? He yelled from the living room. Get ready for breakfast and class. Su-chan immediately scurried back and forth in the room like an ant on a hot pan. It's over, it's over, it's over, it's over. Li Yundong pushed the door open and poked his head in. When he saw Su-chan's appearance, he froze. Don't tell me you didn't sleep last night. Su-chan smiled dryly. No, I just woke up. Li Yundong saw that she was acting strangely and thought that she had just woken up in the morning. He looked away disapprovingly and knocked on the door. Hurry up, he said, knocking on the door. Oh, Su-chan said. She was so anxious that she knocked over the bedside table when she passed by the bed. Suddenly, a large number of books fell from the table. Su-chan hurriedly crouched down to pick up the books. While she was busy picking them up, she suddenly saw that there was also a disc on the floor. There was a line of words written on it. Days of living with a flight attendant. Su-chan was stunned. It can't be such a coincidence, can it? At this time, Li Yundong called out again outside the door. Hey, you're not asleep again, are you? Coming. Su-chan shouted in a panic. She quickly stuffed the broken CD under the bed, then took the CD with the words written on it in her hand, pretending to be calm as she went out the door. Happy reading. OM/. Chapter 101. Go to CNET. Su-chan and Su-chan took a taxi after they left the house, but the traffic on Renmin Road was jammed. Go to CNET. 7K. OM. Literature through the car window. Li Yundong saw traffic police officers and supervisors everywhere. He chuckled. Come on, the leader is here for an inspection again. The taxi driver in the front row turned around and laughed. You know about it too? I heard the provincial leader is here. Li Yundong sighed. How long are they going to block the road? Who knows? The taxi driver laughed. After being stuck in a traffic jam for half an hour, the traffic started to move again. When they arrived at the classroom, Feng Na had been waiting for them at the door for a while. Ha! The national idol is here. Feng Na giggled. She held her hand out in front of Li Yundong. Give me the CD. Li Yundong looked at Feng Na with disdain. What the hell are you girls thinking? How could you keep living with a flight attendant like it's your treasure? Is there something wrong with your brain? What era is this? Feng Na snorted. None of your business. It's just out. It hasn't been released yet. Li Yundong suddenly grinned. Who said that? I have a copy of Living with a Flight Attendant at my place. I've kept it for a long time. Feng Na's eyes widened. Impossible. My friend got it from an insider. It's not even available on TV stations or online yet. Li Yundong chuckled. How about I lend it to you some other day? Feng Na looked at him with a vigilant expression. One who is unaccountably solicitous is hiding evil intentions. It's definitely not something good. Hey, give me back the CD. I still have class. Li Yundong laughed. You're always coming to our class. Why don't you stay back a year and stay in our class? Feng Na spat. I'm a good student with a scholarship. Do you think I'm like you, a student who plays truant and fights all day long? Li Yundong yelled. I'm still going to class every day. Do you think it's easy for me to travel from the east to the west of the city? Feng Na laughed and said, You deserve it. Who told you not to live on campus? You want to hide a mistress in a golden house. There was a hint of jealousy in her tone. Go to CNET. 7K. OM. Literature. Li Yundong chuckled and stopped talking. He glanced at Su-chan and said, You didn't bring the disc, did you? With Li Yundong's backpack on her back, Su-chan anxiously pulled out the CD and handed it to Li Yundong. When Feng Na saw that there were words written on the disc, she immediately laughed and said, The words are so ugly. Li Yundong was stunned for a moment. He glanced at the disc and thought to himself, Why does this disc look so familiar? Before he could say anything, Feng Na waved the disc in her hand and said with a smile, Forget it, I'm leaving. By the way, you should come back to the Taekwondo club when you have time. We are a group of dragons without a leader now. Li Yundong withdrew his gaze from the disc in her hand. He had some doubts in his heart, but his attention was still diverted by Feng Na. I'm not going. Don't drag me into this again. I have enough troubles now. Sometimes, I don't think you're human at all. Otherwise, how could you have done so many unthinkable things? Feng Na said, looking at Li Yundong with a serious expression. Are you a legendary martial arts master? Li Yunyang said with a serious face, actually, I am Ultraman from planet Namek. My purpose is to save the Earth and maintain world peace. Feng Na covered her mouth and giggled. What a joke. Did Ultraman come from planet Namek? Are you bullying me for not watching Dragon Ball? You said you are Ultraman. Why don't I see you wearing your underwear outside? Li Yundong stretched out his hand and pointed. Earthling, watch your tone. Don't compare me to that useless Superman. Feng Na burst out laughing. I'm not going to talk to you anymore. I'm leaving. The two of them chatted and laughed for a while at the door of the classroom before separating. As soon as Li Yundong entered the classroom, the students who were whispering to each other in the classroom suddenly quieted down. They all looked at Li Yundong with inexplicable and complicated eyes, as if they were looking at a visitor from outer space. Although Li Yundong had gotten used to being the center of attention these days, he still couldn't get used to such complicated gazes. He braced himself and led Su Chan to the back row. Watch net. After sitting down, Su Chan whispered to him, Yundong, why don't we not go to school here? It was too eye-catching. Rainbow carrot asterisk literature under learning % super hashtag fast. Update. Li Yundong sighed. I want to too, but if I don't go to school, my parents will stop giving me benefits. What am I supposed to do without the money? What am I supposed to do? He said. If I can't even get my graduation certificate, where am I going to find a job? How am I going to feed you and myself? When Su Chan heard this, she didn't say anything. She sighed and said, it's really difficult to hear the Tao, but it's difficult to hear the Tao. It's difficult to hear the Tao, but it's difficult to get rich. She thought for a moment and said to Li Yundong, Yundong, you'd better go after Xueqi. How can you cultivate without money? Li Yundong poked her forehead with his finger. Why are you here again? Are you testing me? Su Chan covered her forehead and pouted. You can take her as your disciple. Which great cultivator did not take in disciples to amass wealth? Otherwise, everyone can forget about cultivating and starve to death. Li Yundong opened his mouth and was about to speak when he saw Xueqi walking in from the classroom door. Xueqi stood at the door of the classroom and looked around. She saw that Li Yundong was looking at her and opened his mouth as if he wanted to say something. She smiled and walked towards Li Yundong. The boys in the classroom were jealous and envious. What kind of luck does he have with women? Not only does he have a little beauty next to him, but he also has a big beauty coming up to him. What can I do for you? Xueqi sat down next to Li Yundong and said with a smile. Li Yundong laughed dryly. Nothing. Xueqi stared at Li Yundong for a while, then said with a smile, no, there must be something. Su Chan was about to ask Xueqi if she was willing to be Li Yundong's disciple, but Li Yundong quickly covered her mouth. Li Yundong held Su Chan's struggling mouth and said seriously, it's okay. It's really okay. Xueqi looked at Li Yundong and Su Chan suspiciously. Okay. Oh right. This is for you. She took out a cell phone from her bag and handed it to Li Yundong. Li Yundong looked at the phone. It was a Nokia N-series phone. It was very expensive. What is this for? He asked in confusion. Xueqi looked at him strangely. You can't use your card, right? You can use this to contact me from now on. Li Yundong shook his head. How can I take something from you? Xueqi looked at Li Yundong seriously. You saved my life, and I haven't thanked you yet. You don't even want to accept a little gift from me? You're too cold-hearted, aren't you? Li Yundong shook his head again. How about this? I'll buy a card after class. I'll give you my number as soon as I can. Is that okay? Actually, if you could help me solve the problem at the school gate yesterday, I would be very grateful. Otherwise, I wouldn't be able to pay for the damage done to my Mercedes-Benz. Seeing that he was determined not to accept it, Xueqi sighed in her heart and said, if Lu Chonghe knew that I was involved in this matter, he wouldn't dare to make trouble for me even if he had two guts. Moreover, this car was definitely driven by Lu Chuan. Even if you beat him to death, He wouldn't dare to say what he did with the car. So, he will definitely lie to Lu Changhe. You can rest assured that I will not be wrong. Li Yundong patted his chest. That's good. That's good. Xueqi couldn't help but laugh at the relieved look on his face. You're so powerful, she said. Why are you so afraid of something like this? Li Yundong laughed. I can't be a hero without money. I'm in negative equity now, and I'm in huge debt. If I have any more debt, I'll really have to sell my body. Xueqi wanted to say, how much money? I'll buy it. But she knew that she couldn't tell Li Yundong the truth. Even though the boy in front of her was playful, mature and childish, there was one thing in his bones that didn't change, and that was that he was a proud man that couldn't be taken lightly. If she said that, Li Yundong would definitely feel very embarrassed, and it would be difficult for them to be friends in the future. Summer vacation is coming, Xueqi said with a smile. Are you going to work part-time? Li Yundong laughed. That's an idea. But how much money can a college student earn from a part-time job during the summer? But I have to go. Xueqi smiled and secretly made up her mind. Since Li Yundong is short of money, I'll see if I can introduce him to a job with a higher salary in the future. Thinking of this, Xueqi smiled and handed the phone in her hand to Xueqi, saying, Xueqi, Li Yundong refuses to accept this phone, so I have to give it to you. Otherwise, I'll have to throw it away later. Xueqi pried Li Yundong's hand away from her mouth and took the phone with a smile. Really? Li Yundong stared at her. You have the nerve to accept it? Xueqi made a face at him. What's there to be embarrassed about? She said, holding the phone happily. She looked back and forth, but didn't know how to use it. Li Yundong felt helpless. He knew that if he refused again, it would be really inexcusable. He patted Xueqi on the head. Hey, why don't you thank Xueqi? Xueqi looked up and giggled. Thank you, Sister Xueqi. When Xueqi gave the phone to Xueqi, she was afraid that Xueqi would refuse. Her heart was beating fast. Now that she saw Xueqi accept the phone, she was relieved. She smiled and said, You're welcome. My number is saved in the phone. You can call me if you need anything. While they were talking, the teacher had already entered the classroom. Since the exam was approaching, the teacher was also marking the key points in the class. Li Yundong had been disqualified from taking the exam for this class because he had skipped too many classes. Therefore, he had some peace and quiet. He sat in the back row and watched Xueqi play with her new phone. Xueqi, on the other hand, was recording the key points obediently. This continued until the end of the class in the afternoon. Suddenly, a large group of teachers walked into the classroom and interrupted the teacher who was in the middle of teaching. The leader of the group was a middle-aged man with a square face. He had his hands behind his back and looked very imposing. Xueqi was stunned when she saw him. Her brows furrowed. Li Yundong saw her expression and couldn't help but ask, Who is this? My dad. What is he doing here? Xueqi said with a strange look on her face. Happy reading. OM/. Chapter 102. Go to the net. Your father? Li Yundong looked at Xueqi in surprise. He thought to himself, the leader who came to the province to inspect this morning is Xueqi's father? Xueqi nodded, her two eyebrows tightly knitted together. Her father's sudden appearance here gave her a very bad feeling at this time. Go to the internet. 7K. Oath M. Rainbow Carrot Literature % Super #speed. On the podium, Xueqi's father glanced at the students under the podium with a dignified gaze. The vice principal accompanying him said to the students in the classroom with a smile, Students, it is an honor for Vice Governor Zhou to come to our school and work. Please applaud and welcome him. Clap, clap, clap. There was immediately a burst of applause in the classroom. The students all looked at the medium-sized middle-aged man in a gray Chinese tunic suit with inexplicable awe. Xueqi's father glanced at Xueqi and nodded silently. The nod was so small that only Xueqi could feel it. When his gaze swept past Xueqi and fell on Li Yundong, he frowned secretly and looked at Li Yundong meaningfully. Xueqi saw the slight change in her father's expression and was shocked. She glanced at Li Yundong unconsciously. What did young master he say when he went back yesterday? He didn't come for Li Yundong, did he? Li Yundong saw Zhou Qin's unnatural expression and asked, "What's wrong with you?" Zhou Qin forced a smile. "Nothing." When Zhou Qin's father finished speaking on the stage, the crowd applauded again and sent the vice-governor away. When Vice-Governor Zhou left, except for Li Yundong, Su Chan, and the others, no one knew that the vice-governor was the father of their classmate, Zhou Qin. After school, Zhou Qin, who was in a heavy mood, didn't have time to say hello to Li Yundong. She picked up her handbag and rushed out of the classroom. As soon as she got out of the classroom, she saw a young man in a suit waving at her. Qin, over here." Zhou Qin walked over and said politely, "Secretary Liu, where's my father?" Secretary Liu pointed at an inconspicuous Audi 6 parked opposite the school gate. "He's waiting for you there." Zhou Qin nodded, walked to the Audi at the school gate, opened the door, and got in. As soon as she got in the car, she said with vigilance and sarcasm, "Oh, Vice-Governor Xueqi, why are you here today?" Xueqi smiled bitterly. Qin, we are father and daughter, not enemies. You don't have to treat me like this, do you?" Zhou Qin sat in the back seat, far away from her father. She crossed her arms over her chest and said straightforwardly, "Tell me, why are you here?" "Young master," he cried to his father. Xueqi looked at his beautiful daughter with bright eyes. He had always been proud of having such a beautiful daughter, but as she grew older, her beauty became more and more amazing, and this pride slowly became a terrible burden. Many young masters in the system were peeping at her beauty. Young master, he was definitely not the first, and definitely not the last. However, after comparing them, Xueqi felt that young master he was the more promising one among these hedonistic sons. Moreover, with young master he's family background, the marriage between the two families would definitely bring him and his family to a whole new level. Go to the internet. 7K. Oath M. Literature. As for young master he's bad habits of eating, drinking, whoring, and gambling, Xueqi didn't care at all. In his opinion, which man didn't have some of these habits? He could slowly change after getting married in the future. After Zhou Qin learned that she was going to be engaged to young master she didn't show much enthusiasm at first. She was still as cold as an iceberg, but recently, Xueqi found that Zhou Qin's resistance was becoming more and more obvious and strong. She even scolded young master in public and said that she would rather die than marry. These words made Xueqi feel as if he was sitting on pins and needles. Therefore, the next day, he found an excuse to come down and see what his daughter was up to. More importantly, he wanted to see what the boy who made his obedient daughter so rebellious was like. Alas! Xueqi looked at Zhou Qin carefully for a while, then shook his head and sighed. "You look so stubborn like your mother." Zhou Qin smiled coldly. "You still remember what she looked like? It's really surprising. I thought you had forgotten what she looked like after she died 10 years ago." Xueqi suddenly became angry. "Don't talk to me in that tone." Vice-Governor Zhou had been in a high position for a long time, so when he was angry, he naturally had a terrifying momentum. However, Zhou Qin's expression didn't change. She sneered and said, "Then what tone should I use to talk to you? Should I use the flattering tone of your subordinates to talk to you? Sorry, I can't learn it. I just scolded young master a few times, and you came here from the provincial capital. On my birthday, you didn't come back until everyone had left. Young master he is just an outsider, and I am your daughter, but you treat him like this. What do you want me to think? What tone do you want me to use to talk to you? Say it yourself." Xueqi opened his mouth and wanted to say something, but he found that he was speechless. He breathed heavily and took out a cigarette from his pocket. He wanted to smoke, but he heard Zhou Qin say coldly, "If you want to smoke, go out, or I can go out." Xueqi's hand that was lighting the cigarette froze. He glared at his daughter fiercely. After a long time, he suppressed his anger and roared in a low voice, "What do you want? What's wrong with you?" Zhou Qin said lightly, "I'm not evil. You're the one who's evil. You've lost your mind." Xueqi said angrily, "Then why did you change so much? Why did you acquiesce before?" Zhou Qin said coldly, "I didn't understand before, but now I do. I want to pursue the life I want." Xueqi laughed angrily. "Is it because of that Li Yundong?" Zhou Qin frowned even more. She snorted coldly and said, "It's not his fault. Don't look for him. Xueqi snorted heavily and said angrily, I always thought you were very smart, sensible, and mature. Now it seems that you are really stupid. If a woman like you doesn't have a strong background, anyone who marries you will be killed and exterminated. Have you read so many history books since you were a child for nothing? Xueqi laughed out loud and said, Don't try to scare me with that. I'm not a child anymore. I'll say it for the last time. I will never marry young Master He. If you want to marry him yourself. As she said this, she pushed open the car door and was about to get out. Go to the internet. Color. Super_speed. Go to the internet. New. Xueqi was furious. Don't forget what your surname is, and don't forget where your luxurious life came from. Since you've enjoyed all this, you have the obligation to pay for it. Xueqi stopped, turned her head, and looked at her father with a cold gray gaze. Well, the truth is finally out. In your eyes, I'm just an object with value, just like a pot of flowers and plants. You've cultivated me since I was a child, and when I grow up, you naturally have to sell me for a good price. Xueqi, you said it so well. However, I also have something to tell you. I can give up this surname, and I can give up everything. Xueqi's eyes showed a resolute look. You are my father. You should know what kind of person I am. So don't force me. Xueqi was so angry that he almost went crazy. He had never been bullied by his daughter like this. He breathed heavily, gritted his teeth and said, Don't be in such a hurry to leave. As he said this, he threw a cell phone over. Listen to it yourself. Xueqi picked up the phone suspiciously and vigilantly, only to find that it had been turned off the whole time. However, a clear voice came from the other side. Is this student Li Yundong? Li Yundong's voice also came clearly from the phone. Yes, and you are? Ah, I'm a colleague of Xueqi's father. Can I talk to you for a while? Xueqi recognized the voice immediately. It was Xueqi's personal secretary, Secretary Liu. Xueqi suddenly covered the phone's microphone with her hand and glared at her father. You are shameless. Xueqi sneered. If you think I'm shameless, then you can kill yourself. Xueqi stared at the phone as if she were possessed. Her whole body trembled slightly, and her eyes were full of fear and worry. She knew her father's methods very well. In the past, there had been a few boys who had pestered her, and they had all been dealt with by threats and promises in the same way. Although her father was an honest official, he had a very rich younger brother. Sometimes, when he could solve a problem with money, he would never be careless. This time, was he going to do the same thing again? Xueqi listened nervously to the clear voice on the phone. For a moment, the two people in the car didn't speak. Only the sound of heavy breathing and conversation could be heard. Can we find a place where no one is around to talk? Secretary Liu had a briefcase under his arm. He was carefully looking at the boy in front of him through his gold-rimmed glasses, and there was a sense of condescension in his eyes. Although Li Yundong was puzzled, he still nodded politely. Wait for me, he said to Xueqi. Xueqi nodded obediently. The two of them went to the pavilion behind the teaching building. Secretary Liu looked around and sighed. Although Tiannan University is not famous, the construction of the school is still well done. Li Yundong didn't know the purpose of his visit, so he closed his mouth and didn't answer. Secretary Liu smiled and sat down beside the stone table. Are you familiar with Xueqi? He asked. Li Yundong frowned secretly and nodded. Not bad. Secretary Liu looked left and right at the scenery and said in a casual tone, The scenery here is very good. I really miss my university life. Li Yundong frowned and said, What do you want from me? Please tell me directly. I still have something to do. Secretary Liu looked at Li Yundong carefully and sighed. Young people nowadays are really impatient. Li Yundong saw that the secretary was not being polite, so he replied bluntly, That's because I don't have as much time as you do to squander it. Secretary Liu was stunned, as if he was not used to an ordinary student talking to him like this. He was unhappy in his heart. Well, since you want to get straight to the point, then I'll get straight to the point, he said. He took out a stack of checkbooks and a pen from his bag, looked at Li Yundong, and said, How much do you want to leave Xueqi? Li Yundong laughed and said, What are you talking about? What do you mean by leave her? I've never been with her. Secretary Lu didn't seem to believe his words at all. He just stared at Li Yundong and said, 100,000? Li Yundong was angry in his heart. He said coldly, if you want to bribe me with money, I think you've found the wrong person. Li Yundong knew that he had nothing to do with Xueqi at all. At best, they were just ordinary friends. Although this girl was beautiful, he already had Xueqi. He was satisfied and didn't want to find another woman. Therefore, he asked himself if he had found the wrong person to bribe this kind of person. However, Secretary Lu misunderstood. He thought that Li Yundong was using this sentence to express his contempt and disdain. Secretary Lu smiled and didn't get angry because of this sentence. In his opinion, everything in the world had a price, including this so-called love. There had never been a loyal woman in the world. It only depended on whether she was lured enough. There had never been a loyal man in the world. It only depended on whether there was enough bargaining chips for betrayal. Secretary Lu said lightly, 200,000. Li Yundong was angry. He snorted disdainfully and said, boring. Then he was about to leave. Secretary Lu looked at his back and shouted, 1 million. At this moment, Li Yundong's back suddenly stopped. Secretary Lu crossed his legs and looked at Li Yundong's back leisurely, with a smug smile at the corner of his mouth. There was a dead silence in the pavilion. In the car, Xueqi looked at the silent phone and trembled unconsciously. She was nervous, she was scared. She was very afraid that the almost perfect and mysterious image that she had created in her heart would suddenly fall apart at this moment. Xueqi unconsciously thought of Li Yundong's words before. Is a man a hero for a penny? Yes, since ancient times, when faced with the temptation of money and power, how many real heroes could stand firm? She didn't have anything to do with him. Would he just take the money and accept it? Even if he took the money, she couldn't blame him for anything. But if that was the case. Happy reading. OM/. Chapter 103. Go to Watch Network. Secretary Lu had graduated from a famous university and had a high academic background. He had become a confidential secretary at a young age, so he was very proud of himself. In the face of Li Yundong, a college student from a diploma mill, he naturally had a sense of superiority. It was not the first time he had dealt with this kind of thing. A girl like Xueqi would naturally have many pursuers, but he could usually achieve his goal by threatening others. As for the one in front of him, Secretary Lu had heard a little about this boy. Go to watch. Literature very good at fighting? What era was it? So what if he could fight? Fighting and killing were things that only gangsters would do. He really didn't know why Xueqi liked such a boy. If it weren't for the fact that Xueqi seemed to be sincere this time, how could she have offered such a high price to this young boy? Secretary Lu's heart was full of disdain. He watched Li Yundong walk back confidently, put his hands in front of his chest, and said, What, have you figured it out? That's right. How much can a person earn in his lifetime? Don't worry, the money is absolutely clean. As long as you take it and disappear. As he spoke, he quickly signed the check and handed it over in his hand. Li Yundong stared at Secretary Lu closely. He took the check and glanced at it. Suddenly, he smiled disdainfully. Secretary Lu's face darkened slightly. What are you laughing at? Li Yundong shook his head with a smile and said, I'm laughing at why there are always some people in this world who think that money can settle everything. Why are there always some people in this world who think that they can manipulate others like puppets? Secretary Lu said with a sullen face. What do you mean? Li Yundong tore the check into pieces and said coldly, I'll say it again. Xueqi and I are just ordinary friends. Whether she likes me or not is her right and freedom. I respect that. I only like Xueqi, and I will only have her as my girlfriend. Do you understand? Don't humiliate Xueqi and me with this kind of thing. Secretary Lu stared at Li Yundong for a long time and suddenly smiled. I really don't know if you don't realize what it means if you marry a girl like Xueqi, or are you cunning enough to advance by retreating? Li Yundong sneered and said, What's there to not realize? Isn't it just 20 years less of hard work? So what? In order to save 20 years of hard work, he would sell his own personality and self-esteem. In the future, he would have to tuck his tail between his legs and pretend to be a man outside and a grandson at home. Was this something worth showing off? Ridiculous. Li Yundong said with fervor and assurance. The woman I value must be a woman who will share weal and woe with me. She never abandoned me when I was at my lowest, so I will never abandon her for a moment. When he said the last two sentences, he thought of Su-chan, who he had been with day and night, and couldn't help but soften his gaze and tone. Watch net. Rainbow carrot asterisk literature _ learning % super hashtag speed. Update. Secretary Lu was silent for a while, then said lightly, It seems that you are a romantic. Li Yundong said, It's not love. I just want to prove that her choice was right. Secretary Lu suddenly felt a little confused. What kind of person was this boy in front of him? Was he deliberately saying some righteous words, or was he really such a hot-blooded and infatuated fool? But no matter what, it was good for him to understand the matter. Secretary Lu secretly breathed a sigh of relief. He said, Since you don't want the money, well, we will arrange a new school for you, which is much better than this university. When you graduate, we will also arrange a good job for you. You will marry the woman you love and have children with. You see, what a beautiful life it is, isn't it? Well, tell me, when do you want to leave, so I can arrange it? Li Yundong looked at him and asked, That's strange. When did I agree to leave this place? Secretary Lu choked for a moment. His face turned red and he said, Didn't you already promise not to contact Xueqi? You leaving her life is the best way. Li Yundong laughed loudly. Ridiculous. It's really ridiculous. You can't do anything to Xueqi, but you want me to give in. I'll stay here and I won't go anywhere. No one can control my life. Do you understand? Secretary Lu was furious. Are you refusing a toast only to be forced to drink a forfeit? Li Yundong sneered and said, I think you are the one who refuses a toast only to be forced to drink a forfeit. Take your things and leave. Don't appear in front of me in the future. Secretary Lu said angrily, Are you threatening me? Do you know who you are threatening? Li Yundong's eyes were like lightning. Do you know who you are threatening? Don't think that being an official is great. Let me tell you, I, Li Yundong, have a stable position. I have never been afraid of any evil spirits. You'd better not provoke me, or I will let people like you know what it means to be angry. Within 10 steps, blood will be spilled. As he said this, Li Yundong slapped the stone table in the pavilion with a bang. With a clatter, the stone table broke into pieces, and a piece of gravel fell with a crash. Go to the internet. Li Yundong picked up the gravel with the tip of his foot and grabbed it with his 5 fingers. With a sudden force, the stone was crushed into powder. Secretary Lu had been living a comfortable life in the agency for a long time, so he had never seen such a scene. He was so shocked that he took 2 steps back and stared at Li Yundong as if he were looking at a devil. He pointed at Li Yundong and couldn't speak for a long time. Li Yundong sneered and scattered the lime in his hand. He looked at Li Yundong coldly, then turned around and left. After Li Yundong left the pavilion, Director Chen, who was standing not far from the teaching building, happened to see him and Secretary Lu leave on bad terms. Director Chen's face showed a meaningful look, and he smiled sinisterly. Li Yundong went to the teaching building and greeted Su-chan, who was waiting for him at the bottom of the building. Su-chan had been waiting for a long time, so she ran over with a smile and took Li Yundong's arm. What did you guys talk about? Li Yundong smiled slightly, and the terrifying aura he had when he was angry just now was gone. Nothing, he said. We just chatted for a while. Are you hungry? I'll make you something delicious when we get back. Su-chan cheered. Okay, I want to eat beer duck. Li Yundong smiled. You just had it yesterday. Are you going to eat it again today? Su-chan giggled. It's delicious. After the two of them walked out of the school gate, Xueqi looked at them through the window with a complicated look in her eyes. Only then did she throw the phone back to her father, Xueqi. Are you satisfied now? She asked with a sneer. By now, Xueqi's anger had dissipated a lot. Or should I say, are you satisfied now? He doesn't have any feelings for you at all, and he's very infatuated with you. Don't try to get close to him. Xueqi looked at her father with an inexplicable sadness in her eyes. Dad, why haven't you figured it out yet? I like this boy because he has something that boys nowadays don't have. Xueqi sneered. What is it? Is it because of that old man's anger just now? What a joke. How childish. Xueqi shook her head and sighed. Dad, I think you're the real childish one. You always want to control something, and you always think that you can control everything. Save it. There are officials above you who are much more powerful than you. Even if you can sit in the chairman's position, so what? There are still people above you who are much more powerful than you. I like him precisely because of his infatuation and single-mindedness towards Xueqi. If he were a promiscuous person, how could such a person be worthy of my love? Xueqi looked at her father and said, Poverty can't be shaken, power can't be subdued, and wealth can't be corrupted. This is what a man should be. Dad, I like such a man. You should be happy for me. If you let me marry young Master He, let's not talk about whether I can be happy for the time being. Even if the two families get married, so what? Once something happens, do you think a marriage on paper will be safe? Please, husband and wife are birds in the same forest. When disaster comes, they fly separately. Dad, you should know this better than me, right? Besides, how do you know that Li Jiandong's future achievements in life will not surpass young Master He, who is a skeleton in the grave? Xueqi snorted coldly. What is young Master He? What is he? Is this guy willing to enter the system? Even if he is willing with his temper, he will be played to death in less than a year. Seeing that her father's attitude had softened for a while, Xueqi no longer showed an extremely tough attitude. She sighed faintly and said, Dad, you haven't dealt with this boy, so you won't understand. But I have witnessed the incredible power in him several times with my own eyes. Therefore, I firmly believe that there is a kind of power in this world that can surpass secular power and money. Xueqi was silent. He sucked hard on the cigarette in his mouth. Both father and daughter were silent for a moment. After a while, Xueqi opened the door and said, If there's nothing else, I'll go first. Xueqi said in a deep voice, Don't you think it will be very tiring for you to interfere in other people's affairs like this? Xueqi turned around and said, This is my choice, not a choice forced on me by others. No matter how hard and tiring it is, I will gladly endure it. With that, she slammed the car door shut and left without looking back. After Xueqi left for a long time, the door suddenly opened and Secretary Lu got in. The two men looked at each other in the car. Their faces were dark and they were silent. Xueqi threw the cigarette to him and said, Smoke it yourself. After lighting the cigarette, Secretary Lu took a deep breath and then let out a long breath, as if he was venting something in his heart. Xueqi looked at him. After a while, he suddenly smiled and said, How does it feel to be threatened? Secretary Lu shivered and shook his head with lingering fear. It's horrible. Xueqi was a little surprised. How does it feel? Can you describe it? Secretary Lu laughed self-deprecatingly. It's a feeling that my life is in the palm of someone else's hand. As he spoke, Secretary Lu moved a little closer to Xueqi. He leaned his head over and lowered his voice, saying, This guy smashed a stone table with ease just now, and then he crushed a stone right in front of me. Leader, I won't hide it from you. Damn it, I was so scared just now that I was about to pee. The look in that guy's eyes was too scary. Don't let me meet him again in the future. I'm afraid of having nightmares. Xueqi was stunned. Is it really that bad? Secretary Lu sighed. Yeah, that's a real bluestone table. It's not made of flour. How can my head be harder than this table? This guy is right. We are wearing shoes, but he is barefoot. Xueqi stopped talking. He lowered his head and kept smoking, so that the smoke in the car lingered. If that's the case, then things can't be solved so rashly. Well, let's put this matter aside for a while and see how it goes. With that, he raised his head and let out a long sigh. Poverty can't be changed, power can't be subdued, and wealth can't be corrupted. Hey, is there really such a person in this world? Happy reading. You're tuning in to the Xueqi's Martial Arts Saga YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.